The Medical Board of California Board meeting. Today is Thursday, January the 16th, 10 a.m. I'm Dr. Joseph Zamuto. I'm president of the board, and I'd like to wish everyone a Happy New Year and safe travels during our stormy day today. A couple of words of housekeeping. If anyone needs the restroom, you go out the door, take a right, then take a left by the staircase. Another request, of course, is that this is a meeting whereby we ask you to turn off your buzzers. If you have to make a call, please leave the room and do so quietly. Also, we request that that if there's any things that I'd like to bring up, I'll note that the students are here this morning and I'd like to welcome you here. And this is a learning experience for you, and I'll try to make notes of things to bring to your attention that might be of interest. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. So let's begin by our roll call.
Cyrus Kumari.
Present.
Andrew Marino.
Present.
Elizabeth Jensen.
Present.
Claudia Mercado. Cheryl Williams.
Present.
Joseph Zamuto.
Present. Thank you. Next, number 2 is public comments on agenda public comments on items not on the agenda. So at this point, we usually ask if there's anyone who has any comments in the audience. And seeing none, we'll move forward with item number 3, which is the election of officers. Usually the January meeting is when we elect officers for the year. And we have 3 officers, president, vice president, and secretary treasurer. I'd like to ask for a nomination for president.
I nominate Dr. Zamuto, President.
Are there any others? Don't need a second.
Would you accept
We
it?
do need a second?
No, I just have to know you would accept the
Oh, yeah,
position.
yeah, yeah. I'll be happy to.
It's not indentured servitude.
I'll be happy to accept services for another year. Thank you for your vote of confidence. Next, we have Vice President.
I nominate Cheryl Williams.
And Cheryl Williams, do you accept the role?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Office of Secretary Treasurer. I'd like to nominate Cyrus Bahare, DO.
I accept.
Thank you. That will end the election of officers, or do we need a vote? Okay. So we'll do them individually?
Yes.
Okay.
Vote for yourself.
Okay. So we'll do a roll call first for president office.
Dr. Kumari.
Yes.
Andrew Marino.
Yes.
Dr. Jensen.
Yes.
Cheryl Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Zamuto.
Yes. Next, we'll vote for the vice president.
Do we have to do first and second?
Cheryl Williams.
Yeah. Dr. Kumari.
Yes.
Andrew Marino.
Yes.
Dr. Jensen.
Yes.
Cheryl Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Zamuto.
Yes. Thank you. Next, for the office of secretary treasurer.
Dr. Kumari.
You can vote for yourself, yeah.
Yes.
Andrew Marino.
Yes.
Dr. Jensen.
Yes.
Cheryl Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Zamuto.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, next I'm going to go into my president's report, and there's a couple interesting things. One of the projects I've been working on with the Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons of California is putting together a education piece on the process of applying for postgraduate training. The license is new for the year 2020 and moving forward, and this would be a 3-year training license for postgraduate interns and residents. After which the 3 years, then the applicant can then have a permanent license, excuse me. The plan for disseminating the information, at least at the Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons of California, their annual meeting is next month in San Diego, and we'll be having we decided to do a workshop because we figured this would be a specific audience and would give a opportunity for people to have an opportunity to see what the requirements are, ask questions about the requirements. And it's a step-by-step, hopefully easy to follow directions. And this information will also be on the OMBC website. It'll also have links for how to get the application, how to get your fingerprints taken, and a variety of things. Our job is to provide as much information to the individuals coming forward for license to make this a seamless process and transition. The importance of the process, of course, is completing all the steps, paying all the fees, and doing so in a timely fashion. The concern, of course, is people who wait to the last minute will get in trouble because it'll take time to get the license and there'll be delays in their education process. So, did you have anything you wanted to say about what we're doing so far, Mark?
Yeah, we're still in the transition phase of the PTL. Went into effect January 1st, 2020. Our current, yeah, so we're still in the transition. It went into effect January 2020. Right now, what we're doing is we're trying to get all of the full licensure applicants that came in prior to January 1st out of the office. And then at that point, we're going to focus on getting all the postgraduate training licenses that have come in done at that point. We made a decision. I know in our fact sheet that we sent out, we said to turn the applications in before October 1st. I think was the date we said. But after talking to Dr. Zamuto and some other folks, I honored all the applications that came in prior to January 1st. So anything that came in before then will get a full licensure, even if we're still working on it into this year. That's what we're doing.
Right. I'd also like to publicly thank the Director of OPSC Meetings and Publications, Carl Bauer, who's been instrumental in helping with this project, as well as giving us time in the annual meeting. And also, I couldn't do this project without Elaine Ho, DO, family medicine individual, and she has been the individual who has been doing all the legwork on the process, and she will be the main presenter of the project, and I will be doing introductions and then answering questions. Okay, next item is in your board packet. You have a guidelines from the main Board of License regarding communicating with patients. And my goal with this, of course, is to present it as an informational item on our website. And this is an excellent, I think, document that discusses why it's so important to have guidelines on physician-patient interaction, communication skills, having the ability to ask open-ended questions, having a comfortable setting, and being a kind listener. And we find that many of the complaints that come forward to the board are usually complaints because their doctor just doesn't listen to them. And when the doctor doesn't listen to them, there sometimes are errors or omissions that can occur that can lead to a complaint. So this might be very, very helpful in helping physicians refocus themselves on being more humanitarian in the work that they do and not see a patient just as another number. So it's an excellent document, and we'll have this on the website. Okay. Any comments from the board members about the document? Or okay, thanks. Lastly, I wanted to mention that in San Diego in April, the Federation of State Medical Boards, which is the national organization of which we are a member, represents all the state medical licensing boards as well as the territorial areas of the United States. And this will be April 30th through May 2nd. I'm putting out a notice on this because I'm on the Education Committee, and I think that we've put together a very, very good program. And it's an opportunity for regulators in medicine to learn more about the job we do, get a national view of the things that we do, and become better at what we do. And it's a good opportunity. And I encourage all the board members and the attorneys, if you're so inclined, to participate. There are specific programs geared for attorneys, specific programs geared for the public, board members, and physicians. So you can go to the website, and I will get that for you guys later. And any questions, I'll have Mark answer that. Other than that, I think that's it. Any questions? Thank you. Okay, now we will go to the review and approval of minutes. Our first document is November 21st, 2019 teleconference. And for the students, we have board meetings in person like this, and we also at times set up telephone conferences for certain agendas to take care of. And maybe in the future, we'll have our video conferences, pending our budget limitations. Can I have a motion to accept?
A motion to accept the minutes?
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing that there's no discussion, corrections, or edits, call for the roll, please, or vote, please.
Dr. Buhari?
Yes.
Dr. Moreno?
Yes.
Dr. Benson?
Yes.
Cheryl Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Kamuta?
Yes. Okay, Mark, should we move to the executive director's report now? And then budget update will come this afternoon?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. And then hopefully no later than 10:30, we'll, if all parties are here, we'll move into hearing. Take it away, Mark.
Awesome. Thank you, Doctor. So I'll be presenting the Executive Director's Report. That's on tab 6 of your packet you have. So I'll be going over some licensing stats, staffing updates, regulations. I'll give some cures stats, and then I'll have my lead enforcement analyst, Corey Sparks, present the enforcement portion of my Executive Director Report. So for licensing, the first portion in the chart you see is our total number of licensees. Our active and current licensees is currently 9,774 active current. And out of that, 9,418 are in California and practicing in California. We have 568 total licensees that are inactive and current, and 304 of those are in California. And we have 1,266 delinquent licensees for a total of 11,608 licensees under the board's jurisdiction. We're still continuing to grow. That's an increase from last board meeting, which is a good thing. Our industry is still continuing to increase. Our second table we have is the licensing unit workload. I have the complete workload from fiscal year 18-19, so that's July 1st of 18 through June 30th of 2019. And I have the first 6 months of fiscal year 19-20, so that's July 1st through December 31st of 19. So for last year, we had 999 applications, which to my knowledge is the most we've ever had in a fiscal year. In the first 6 months of this fiscal year, we had 637, which is a huge increase. A large portion of that is due to the postgraduate training license. I know a lot of folks were getting their applications in prior to January 1st to try to beat that postgraduate training license requirement. So we got a ton of applications in the first 6 months of this year. Out of the 637, 644 were approved. There's a larger number of approved applications because some of those carried over from last year. We got those last year and they were approved in this fiscal year. We issued 599 certificates in the first 6 months, which is also a very large number. We're on track to almost bring in to issue 1,200 certificates this fiscal year, which is good. That's kind of indicative of our growing population. And then our licenses renewed last year were 5,038. That's a large number. In the even number fiscal years, that start with an even number, we renew more just based on birth dates. That's kind of how it works out. We've renewed 2,201 in the first 6 months of this year, so we're down a little bit this year. But like I said, for those renewals, it's kind of a yo-yo. Every other year, we have more in the even number fiscal years. Our fictitious name permits, we've received 66 in the first 6 months. We've approved 46, and we've renewed 531. That 531 is a big number. It's an increasing number as well. So based on this, like, we're looking good. Like, the population is going to continue to increase based on these numbers here.
Just a quick comment for the students. Fictitious name basically means, what is your business name? So a physician can call it Dr. Zmuto, Inc., or they can call it Redwood City Medical Group. So that's a fictitious name. So that has to be brought forward to the licensing board. It has to be found to be acceptable, and if it's so, then it's granted. So that's what that's about.
All right, so the number of days to approve a license application during the current fiscal year is 90 days. Our goal is 60 days. In our application, we do say 3 to 6 months. The increase is due to the number of applications we received in the first 6 months, just to kind of beat that postgraduate training license. Everyone wanted to get their applications in early, so we had such a large number in the first 6 months. It extended our processing time a little bit, but we're working to get that down. And the applications with missing documents took an average of 146 days to complete. And a lot of that is because we're waiting for documents to get in. The application was deficient, so it's taking a little bit longer. But like I said, we're working to get that number down as well. And that's a good segue to the next section, our staffing. We did get two positions, a staff services analyst to process the licensing and an AGPA to process the enforcement for the new postgraduate training license. We received a lot of applications we're going through. We anticipate getting a lot of good candidates and conducting interviews in the next week or two to hire those. So that'll help out with the processing time. So the next section is regulations. We have three major regulations we're kind of working on. The first one is the CME audit. What we're doing is that regulation package, what that's going to do is we currently audit all CMEs at the time of renewal. What this regulation package is going to do is it's going to allow licensees to mark a box that they've done the renewal, done their CMEs at the time of renewal. So if you renew online, it should be an instantaneous new expiration date, and that's kind of the goal, to reduce workload, reduce phone calls, and then what we'll do is we'll audit your renewals on the back end after you've already been issued a new expiration date. Because that's a lot of the problems what we're having now, is that renewals are getting a little backed up toward the end of the month because we have to look at everyone's CME when we look at the renewal. So our goal is to have folks do it online. They mark that box, have put the signature online, and you can get your new expiration date instantaneously. So what we're doing right now is the board and DCA are working collaboratively to finalize this proposal. It's actually back with me. I had to make some corrections and submit it back to the department. The second regulation package is the Assembly Bill 2138, the substantial relationship and rehab criteria proposal. This proposal increases opportunities for applicants and licensees with prior convictions or disciplinary action to obtain licensure if evidence points to rehabilitation. This is a major focus of the department. It's been reviewed by DCA, and the board plans on noticing this proposal in the coming months. And then the last one is the postgraduate training license regulation. So SB 798, which was approved a couple years ago, set forth the process of the postgraduate training license, but the board does not have the authority to charge a fee at this point. This regulation is in process now. The board and DCA know the importance of getting this one approved since it went into effect on January 1st. So this proposal is currently at agency, legal, DCA, and everyone knows the importance of this one, so we'll make sure to get it through as soon as we can. So for Cures, the most recent report I have is November 2019 on that report, which is attached if you'd like more detailed information, but the high-level numbers here are 7,354 DOs are registered as Cures users. The DOs ran 81,720 separate patient activity reports, and they accessed the system 42,492 times.
Can I just tell the students what the CURES is?
Yes.
So the CURES is an electronic system whereby people who have the ability, physicians, dentists, veterinarians, can prescribe scheduled drugs which are restricted drug use. And the opiates, of course, is one of the largest things that are on that, as well as sedative hypnotics and a variety of other classes. And so what's happening throughout the United States, when you see a patient, the physician usually looks in the CURE system to see, have they had this prescription somewhere else and from who? And it's a way of preventing physicians from doctor shopping and obtaining medication for other uses, such as selling the product, using it in excess, so there's just sort of a check and balance. So it's one of the things to combat the opioid crisis. And pharmacies have access to this, so when you present your prescription to the pharmacist puts your information in there and sees that you've been at 6 different pharmacies in the last week. Well, they'll contact the doctor, and so it's hopefully a stopgap. It's one of the stopgaps that we're using. And I'll let Mark continue, sorry.
All right, so the next portion of my executive director's report is the enforcement report. I'll call Corey Sparks, my lead enforcement analyst, forward to present that report. Thanks, Corey.
Good morning. Are we on? There we go, good. Well, good morning. I'm going to present the enforcement report for the last 12 months, pretty much the year of 2019. I have reduced the report a little bit, make it a little bit shorter, not as much information. Try to get some of the redundancy out of it. Okay, so the following OMB enforcement report covers a 12-month period starting from January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. The enforcement report is divided into 5 sections: intake, investigations, enforcement, performance measures, and probation. The data is collected from the Breeze enforcement reports and DCA Qbert, which is the IBM Cognitive Analytics reporting tool that DCA uses. The data table 1 above, under total intake, the board received 583 complaints. 18 of those were convictions. 588 cases were assigned to the desk investigations. The aging for intake measures the period from the date the complaint was received, which is the date we stamp it internally in the office, to the date the complaint was assigned. So those are averages per month. If you see under the aging on that table, those are the average number of days that it takes for the case that we get it, and then we assign that to a desk analyst. Figure 1.1 below, we see the pending complaints peak in February and May, a spike in received complaints in April and August, and a spike in assigned complaints in July. The complaint levels appear to decrease in November and December. However, there's a typo here. It should be not all, not call, but not all complaints have been entered into the system from this period. So typically, historically, in the month of the fourth quarter, there tends to be a backlog, and it's due to usually because of the holidays and because of illnesses. So complaints don't get into the system as quickly as they normally do. But that's been pretty much standard for the for the time I've been here. So, but those complaints will get put back in. So if you also look in figure 1.1, you'll see under the received complaints, that blue line, you see the spikes in April and the spike in August. And so I thought about this, and I'm thinking what the spikes are coming from are from, a lot of the complaints come over from the medical board, and what they do is they hold on to them for a couple of weeks once they get them. So we'll get a stack of them that come in, and then the analyst will put them all into the system. So I think that's what's causing those spikes. Further on, investigations. For all desk investigations during this period, data table 2 above breaks down the monthly totals for how many complaints were assigned and completed, the monthly aging and cases pending. During this period, a total of 589 cases were assigned to desk investigations, 582 were completed. The average number of days to complete a desk investigation was 86 days. In figure 2.2, which is the next page, actually that should be figure 2.1, but it's the next page, the assigned and completed caseloads averaged around 50 per month, except for the month of July, as assignments peaked around 100. Pending desk investigations increased in July from an average of 150 to 200 to the end of the fourth quarter of 2019. Okay, page 2, data table 3 above breaks down the monthly totals for cases assigned to division investigations. Completed cases are either closed with insufficient evidence or referred to the Attorney General's office for disciplinary action. During this 12-month period, 39 cases were assigned to field investigations, 37 were completed, and 48 cases were pending at the end of the, should be the fourth quarter, not the 14th quarter, fourth quarter 2019. The average number of days to complete a field investigation was 278 days, which is down from 316 from the last report, which was down from almost 400 from the last report. So what we're seeing is a decline in the number of days to complete these field investigations, which is a good thing. The case complexity is the breakdown of the specific allegations. Figure 3.1, for all completed field investigations, there were 15 excessive prescribing cases. About 40% of all of our field investigations are excessive prescribing cases. 6 unprofessional conduct, 2 sexual misconduct cases, 1 criminal, 3 fraud, 1 impairment, 4 negligent, 4 substance abuse cases, and 1 unlicensed practice. Any questions on those? Page number 3, data table 4 above, figure 4.1, we see the aging matrix for all the number of investigations that were closed per month within a specific time period. 371 cases, or almost 70%, were completed within 90 days. 108 cases were completed between 3 months to 6 months, and then 48 cases were completed within 181 to 365 days. 19 cases were completed between 1 to 2 years, and 11 cases were completed between 2 to 3 years. 86% of the investigations were completed within 6 months. 95% were completed within a year. So let me just add that most of those cases, when you look at the 90 days and the 160 days, most of those cases, I would say a good portion, almost over 90% of those cases are desk investigations. So when you look at the field investigations, those are going to be 1 to 2 years, hopefully not 3. I mean, we've had actually a couple of cases closed because they went over, but most of those, bulk of those cases are desk investigations, patients. And what the good thing is that the bulk of those are being done within 90 days. That's a really good stat. Enforcement actions. For all enforcement actions, data table 5 above breaks down the monthly totals of each disciplinary action. During this 12-month period, 20 cases were transmitted to the Attorney General's office for disciplinary actions. 13 accusations were filed. 13 final disciplinary orders were filed. 1 accusation withdrawn. 4 cases were closed without disciplinary action. 4 citations issued, and 1 suspension order was filed. Currently, 15 AG cases are pending. So, brief comment on that. I do see a decline. This report shows a little bit of decline in final disciplinary actions. In the past, we've had, up around 20, averaging a year. This last year, we had, looks like we had 13. Of those 13, 2 of them were pre-PLRs, which means that we settled those with public reprimands prior to sending it to the AGs. So they don't show up in this section of the report. But you could say that instead of 13, we really had 15 of them. But there is somewhat of a decline in the number of those final disciplines. Page 4, in data table 6 and figure 6.1, we see the aging matrix of the 13 final disciplinary orders that were completed during this 12-month period. The chart shows the percentage of cases distributed within each aging period. Of the 13 final disciplinary orders, 1 case within 90 to 80 days, 2 cases within 181 to 365 days, 1 case within 2 to 3, 9 cases within 3 to 4 years. Of the 13 disciplinary orders imposed, figure 6.2, there was 8 probationary orders, 1 revocation, 1 surrender, 3 reprimands, and 2 pre-accusation public reprimands. So the 2 there, they don't show up in the AG of our report, but they're there. So yeah, the bulk of those cases take 3 to 4 years to get done once they get to the AG. Page 5, what we see is our performance measures. Performance measure cycle, performance measure 2, cycle time is intake. What we do see here is that the average, what we're looking for, the target is 30 days, and this is when we get a case that comes into the office. We want it from the day it's stamped to the date that it is assigned to a desk analyst. We want that done within 30 days. That is the target that we're looking at, and it looks like, and we've had this particular period, 12 months, we missed quite a bit of that, and I don't know, the answer to that or why it's taking so long. I think there's been some backlogs, but we do want to get those within 30 days. Performance measure 3, cycle time, investigations, no discipline. This target is set at 360, and we're doing very, very well with this. Most of these cases are at the desk investigation level. Most of these cases are being done within 90 days. So we're hitting that target very well. Performance measure 4, cycle time is formal discipline. These cases go to the AG's office. The target is 540 days. Don't know if that's realistic, but that's what it is. So we see that March, April, May, August, September, pretty much we're not hitting that. However, we'll say that most of when these cases go out to the field and go into the AGs, at that point, we don't have much, control over how long it takes. There's a lot of factors that go into field investigations, and then when it goes to the AG, Department of AG. I mean, not Department of AG, but it goes to the AG's office. Probation, there are currently 40, we're on page 6. Probation, there's currently 40 probation cases, of which 9 cases are tolled. Tolling means that they're out of state, they're not currently active, so they're doing pretty much just the basic stuff on that case, which could be like, the quarterly reports, cost recovery. During this period, 9 probationary cases were closed, 7 by completion and 2 by petition. 9 cases were open. The total cost recovery ordered is currently $461,591.83. As of January 10th, $235,574.97 have been recovered, leaving a balance of a little over $225,000. So we're recovering, doing pretty good. So, any questions?
Thank you.
Very good report.
Thank you, okay.
Please let the record reflect that Claudia Mercado has joined us, and Gore Adam A.N. Correct me. Adam A.N. Damian. I put the accent in the wrong place. So at this time, we'll set up for our hearing. Is our stenographer here? Court reporter, thank you for being here. And is our judge here? Thank you. I'll set up a chair in between us up here for you. And are the petitioners here and the attorneys here? Yes. Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and set up. If anyone needs to take a restroom break in the meantime, please hurry back within 5 minutes. Thank you. Court stenographer, We have attorneys, we have clients. This is a formal hearing. And what I usually do at this time is I turn the meeting over to the judge, and I let her run the meeting. So I'd like to thank and introduce Administrative Judge Brown for coming, and I'll let her do her introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zmuto, and good morning to everyone. Again, my name is Judge D. Brown, and I am here to preside over the petition hearings this morning. We are on the record, ma'am? Okay, we are on the record. So we're going to commence by starting with our first case, and that's going to be with Dr. Shapiro. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we are here this morning before the Board of Osteopathic, well, strike that, Osteopathic Medical Board of California. That's the formal title. Again, my name is Administrative Law Judge Danette Brown, and I am here to preside over these hearings. Welcome to everyone, and welcome especially to the students. I always love to see students at these hearings. It's very informative for you, I'm sure, and you walk away just blown away by what you hear at a lot of these hearings. So keep that in mind as you go forward in your careers. Would the members of the board please identify themselves for the record, starting with your first name and obviously your last name, and then we'll call a quorum. So starting with my far right, and if we could just go down the line.
Dr. Elizabeth Jensen.
Andrew Moreno.
Dr. Cyrus Buhari.
Gora Damian.
Dr. Joseph Zmuto.
Cheryl Williams.
Claudia Mercado.
And Dr. Zmuto, do we have a quorum of the members present?
Yes, we do.
Thank you, sir. And the first petition, let me call this case. This is the matter of the petition for the reduction of penalty against Edward L. Shapiro. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning.
This is agency case number 07-2007-2036. OAH number 2019110-864. At this time, may I take the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General, please?
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning, board members. John Gatchett, Attorney General's Office, appearing pursuant to the Government Code.
Thank you, Mr. Gatchett. And for the record, Doctor, if you could please identify yourself.
I'm Edward Lee Shapiro, DL.
Okay, and good morning to you, Dr. Shapiro. And are you choosing to represent yourself here this morning?
Yes.
Okay, I need to get that down for the record. Okay, so before the hearing, Mr. Gatchett related to me that he had already talked to the petitioners in this matter about this proceeding. And as you know, the board is concerned about, your rehabilitation. They want to hear about that since you were placed on probation. And right now, at this point, the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Gatchett, will provide basically an orientation of, I'm sure he gave you an orientation prior to this proceeding, but he will also give a history and background of this case. But I did want to tell you that you do have a right, obviously, to make a presentation of your own to demonstrate to the board that you have been rehabilitated and that supports your petition that you are before the board here today. You also have the right to call witnesses on your own behalf, and you will be subject to questioning by the board at the appropriate time, and also the Attorney General, because he's appearing here on behalf of the people. So again, the board is concerned with any rehabilitation that you may present and any activities you might have engaged after your license was placed on probation. You're reminded that the board has had the benefit of reviewing the petition packet, so you don't really have to repeat anything that's in that packet unless you want to emphasize something. So after the hearing, or both hearings, the board will go into closed session to deliberate, and you won't receive a decision today, but you should receive it in the mail sometime in the future, okay? Any questions?
No, ma'am.
All right, this time I'm going to put you under oath, so if you could kindly raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. So at this time, Mr. Gatchett, would you like to provide a history, background of this case?
Yes, Your Honor, and also I explained to the petitioner that I would also move to admit the documents, and we'll go through them one by one after I provide the synopsis, if that pleases the court.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Gatchett.
All right, so the nexus of this case was an out-of-state discipline case that arose in November of 2006. The petitioner self-reported to the Arizona Board of Osteopathic Medicine that he had an addiction or problem with marijuana. Based on that self-report, in January of 2007, the Arizona Board imposed probation conditions. And those are actually set forth in your packet at Exhibit 6, so you can read kind of what the Arizona Board imposed. This board took action in August of 2009 and imposed a 5-year probation based on that out-of-state discipline. Some of the terms in California's probation would mirror the Arizona terms. There were some additional terms in the California probation. Respondent remained, or the petitioner remained in Arizona and continued to work in Arizona during that time. And so from the very beginning of his placement on probation here with this board in California, that probation told. And so it remained told and actually remains told up until this day. It remained told while he worked in Arizona. And his Arizona probation would terminate in January of 2012. Arizona deemed that he had met the terms and conditions of their probation, and they gave him back a free and clear license. And then he continued to work in Arizona, I believe, until the last couple of years, and then has pretty much retired from practice, has moved to California. He's not working here in California either, and so the license remains told. And as such, the petitioner is seeking termination of his probation. His main contention is that he completed probation with Arizona, that the terms are substantially the same, and that his probation here in California should be awarded that completion in Arizona, and seeking early termination of his probation, despite the fact that it has been told since 2009. All right, if we can turn to the packet that's before the court and the board members, I can go through it and identify the exhibits. I also have a few exhibits that I've shown the petitioner to actually augment the packet. They just didn't get in the packet. We had the Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays, New Year's, people were out of the office. This isn't probably the most perfect packet I've ever put together for the board, but it's substantially all there. Okay, so Exhibit 1 is the notice I received from Mr. Sparks regarding the setting of this hearing, and then I'm going to augment it. May I approach the court?
You may.
With what I'm going to mark 1A, which is actually the notice of hearing we sent out. I would note that the petitioner never actually got that because it went to his Arizona address, and for reasons known to me in my office, it just hadn't been updated in Breeze, but it was the Breeze address we had in file. That said, for jurisdictional purposes, he is present here in court today before the board, and therefore I'd ask that those exhibits be marked as Exhibit 1 and moved into evidence.
All right, the documents have been marked and will be moved into evidence, jurisdictional purposes.
Exhibit 2 is the request to set that was provided, and ask that it be marked for jurisdictional purposes and moved into evidence.
So marked and moved into evidence.
Exhibit 3 is the petitioner's petition in this matter. It also includes a brief summarization by petitioner at page AGO 5. Ask that be marked for jurisdictional purposes as well as the nature of this hearing as Exhibit 3 at page AGO 3, and ask that be moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 3 and moved into evidence.
Exhibit 4, starting at page AGO 6, is the decision and order in this matter here in California. I'd ask that be marked for jurisdictional purposes and as evidence in this case.
So marked as Exhibit 4, moved in, and it's in evidence for jurisdictional purposes.
Exhibit 5 was provided by the petitioner. It is the notification from the Arizona Board in January of 2012 that his probation in Arizona had been terminated and successfully terminated, satisfied. Asked that be marked and moved into evidence.
Marked as 5 and moved into evidence.
Exhibit 6 is the consent agreement. Other boards and other states often refer to different ways to do stipulations. Consent agreement is a common way that Arizona refers to a stipulation, which would be known here as a stipulated decision in order. Ask that that be marked for evidence, marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 6 and admitted.
Exhibit 7 in your packet, starting at AGO 33, is the personal narrative from the petitioner that was attached to his petition and signed. Ask that be marked and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 7 and admitted.
Exhibit 8 are 2 letters of recommendation from medical doctors as required by the statute for a petition for early termination. The 2 doctors, for the record, are Dr. Kassman, Kassman, and Dr. Feldman, Feldman. Ask those 2 letters be marked for identification as Exhibit 8 and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 8 and admitted into evidence.
Exhibit 9 are the quarterly reports. When a probationer is told, there's very few things a probationer has to do because for the most part, the probation obviously is told he's out of state or not working here in state. The one thing he is required to do is submit quarterly reports, and so these are the reports that keep the board aware of where he's working, where he's living. And so I'd ask that Exhibit 9 be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 9 and admitted.
All right. Exhibit 10, and we're going to actually be going through a number of exhibits here that involve psychiatric evaluations or psychotherapy reports. I'm going to be making a request, and I believe the petitioner is in agreement to that, for a protective order sealing a number of the exhibits. And so 10 is going to be one of those exhibits that I'm going to ask that be under the protective order. So I'm going to ask that it be marked for identification and moved into evidence with the understanding that we are going to be asking for a sealing order on that. And I have a copy of the request for the protective order here as well that I can approach the court with.
Please do. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Gatchin, in your petition, you are identifying the specific documents that you request to be sealed?
Yes, okay. Exhibits 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15 are the documents that are identified in that request.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
So based on that, for putting on the record about that and what that document is, this was an evaluation done by a Dr. Sucher, S-U-C-H-E-R, for the Osteopathic Medical Board of Arizona. Asked that Exhibit 10 be marked for identification and moved into evidence pursuant to the request for the sealing order.
Okay. Marked as Exhibit 10 and admitted.
Exhibit 11 is a letter from a Victoria lay regarding petitioner's treatment. Asked that this be marked and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 11 and admitted.
Exhibit 12 is an evaluation by Dr. Sidhu, S-I-D-H-U. Asked that it be marked and moved into evidence, and as stated on the record, asked that it be subject to a sealing order, a protective order, as it does contain psychotherapy discharge notes.
All right, marked as Exhibit 12 and admitted.
Exhibit 13 is a note from a Dr. Uvas, U-V-A-S. Asked that it be marked and moved into evidence subject to a protective order, as it does contain confidential psychiatric and psychological evaluation notes.
Marked as Exhibit 13 and admitted.
Exhibit 14 is an assessment by Lynn Abbas. This is a discharge assessment. Asked that it be marked and moved into evidence, asking that it be subject to a protective order as previously stated.
Marked as Exhibit 14 and admitted.
Exhibit 15 are discharge summaries. They're nursing care summaries. They do contain psychiatric notes. I'd ask that they be marked and moved into evidence subject to a protective order.
Marked as Exhibit 15 and admitted.
Exhibit 16 is a letter from Anna Valenti Anderson at page AGO 98, asked that it be marked and moved into evidence.
Marked as 16 and entered into evidence. It's admitted.
And finally, Exhibit 17 for jurisdictional purposes is the licensure documentation. What's contained in the packet is the Breeze packet. If I may approach,
You may.
I have the certificate of licensure that I just have to ask to be marked as 17A and used to submit what's currently in the packet.
All right, the document is marked as 17A and will be admitted for jurisdictional purposes.
And I believe that concludes all the documents in the packet.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gatchett. Anything else?
Not from my side. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Shapiro, now it's your opportunity to present your case. You may testify on your own behalf, which I imagine you will be doing. And you are reminded that the board has had the benefit of your packet, and you don't need to repeat anything in that packet. So kindly begin.
I want to thank the board for this opportunity. I want to thank Corey Sparks for letting me know that I could ask for early termination of my probation. Really, everything is in the packet, but I would like to go over it. I turned myself into the board in 2007 because I was just smoking a lot of pot. My wife was questioning my behavior, and I thought that if I turned myself in, the board would give urine drug screens and the fear of losing my license would be enough. But that's not what happened. My rehab was much more extensive, and it was difficult, but I learned a lot about myself, my childhood traumas. I ended up with a diagnosis by a Dr. Glacken when I was in my second treatment facility that really helped me, and he basically got me on prescription medications that have really done wonders for me. And I remain on them. I'm scared to change the dose, lower the dose. I've just been on them. I continued going to Narcotic Anonymous meetings and other anonymous meetings till 2014, when I kind of slowed up because my daughter was in PA school and we were doing a lot of Skyping back and forth, and I just didn't have the time with the electronic medical records and the time they took to continue with the meetings. But I had a good support system. I was still under psychiatric care. My wife has been very supportive. My daughter was supportive. And my patients were supportive of me and my office staff. So even though, my probation only lasted to 2012, where I successfully completed it, I have not used any alcohol or smoked any pot, ate any pot, or used any illegal substance other than narcotics, which I used briefly and very sparingly due to multiple complications I had with an infected, a prostatic joint infection. And I think Dr. Kassman very eloquently talks about the minimal use of narcotics that I did. And, so basically, the question was, am I a danger to my patients anymore? Because that's the purpose of the board to decide that. And I believe I have a lot more to offer. I've continued with CME conferences. I haven't practiced for 2 years, end of February. I've kept up with my CME. I continue to be free. I don't do any shameful behavior. The shameful behavior, I'm really upset about, but I'm glad that I was able to resolve that issue and understand why. And I got excellent support from my wife, fortunately, and which made it a lot easier. And I think everything else is in there, so that's where I'm at, and I thank you again for listening to me. And if any questions that you have for me, I'll be glad to field them.
All right, thank you, Dr. Shapiro. So let's go down the line here to my far right. Dr. Jensen, any questions?
Yes, if your license is reinstated, what is your practice plan here in California?
I haven't really, completely decided that. The one thing that's important to me is to kind of clear my name, because I understand that if I don't have my probation terminated, my license will show that it was revoked for disciplinary reasons. At least that's what I was told. And I certainly wouldn't want that to happen. I've thought about doing some locum tenens now that I'm kind of settled in, maybe look for some part-time work. My daughter is a PA, and I could even consider doing something with her. But I don't have any really definitive plans yet. And obviously, I shouldn't have plans until I know that my license is secure.
And just to confirm, your last practice time was February of 2018?
Yes.
And you spoke about your current support network, or the support network that you have had when you moved off of continuing with the NA and having your wife, your daughter, your office staff. Do you feel, and psychiatry, do you feel that that support network would still be here for you in California? Do you
Well,
continue
yes,
to
my
see
wife-
psychiatry?
My psychiatrist actually retired. I'm not sure why. I think it was for medical reasons. So after that, I went to another psychiatrist, but I didn't really get anything out of it. He just basically wrote my prescriptions, didn't discuss anything with me. But I was pretty well set in what I needed to do and what I needed to avoid doing. I stay away from anybody that smokes pot, but I don't know anybody that smokes pot anymore. People that I did that with, I disassociated myself from way back in like 2007. And that's where I'm at with that.
And you stated that you felt well with your current dosage of medication. You have a physician overseeing and
Yes.
established here in California for that?
I have a doctor at Hoag that's a DO. I explained things to him. He's willing to write my prescriptions. I don't have any controlled substances. I don't have any sleeping medicines or anything.
And is he family physician? I
He's,
am
an internist.
intern. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Marino?
Thank you, Your Honor. I read in the packet that what kind of initiated your use of marijuana was struggling with depression. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you have managed that since that time.
I think through therapy, I started realizing my accomplishments and built up better self-esteem. I used pot to try and make myself happy and suppress a lot of anger. And actually, by giving it up and getting appropriate medication, my depression is very well controlled. I don't get up in the morning anymore and say, what am I going to do today? When I'm smoking pot, it would be like, when can I smoke a joint and go back to sleep? So, I don't have that. And I'm very happy in my life, even though we have friends in North Orange County from when we previously lived in California, but my wife and I don't have a lot of friends down here, and yet I find myself doing fine as far as my mood is concerned. So I'm happy with the way that I feel.
When did you?
It's nice to be happy.
Yes. When did you last use marijuana?
Before November 2006, the few days before I reported myself, I had some glasses of wine, but so I used like the November 24th date as my clean date, but because that's when I stopped doing, drinking some wine, but I probably stopped smoking pot maybe a month or two before that.
I'm curious, what is your just general thoughts on the use of marijuana? As you know, it's recreational here now in California. The perception of it has changed a lot.
When I smoked pot, I thought it would be great if it was legal. I think there's a lot of questions about marijuana that people are rushing ahead with. I used to say alcohol's got to be a problem when you can go to an AA meeting 24 hours a day in any major city. And there's Alcoholic Anonymous meetings all over the world. to kind of encapsulate that alcohol is a problem in our society. And I read the other day that there's increased alcohol use, probably because of increased stresses. I think that people are jumping ahead with their use of marijuana. The things I continue to read is very sketchy with pain management. It's approved for two very obscure seizure disorders. I don't really think they understand all the components of marijuana. And I still think, even people, when they used it, said, quote, medical marijuana, which reasons were really silly. Like hepatitis C, when everybody was controlled from their hepatitis C, through the current therapies, but it was still a criteria for marijuana use. So, I don't know, time is going to tell, whether marijuana becomes a problem like alcohol or not.
I read in the packet, you have a personal narrative, but I didn't see a date on it. I'm wondering when you wrote that.
Oh, I wrote it around the time that I was completing the packet. So if I sent, the date on, the one that I sent in, my petition, the date on my petition would be the date that, the day or two before that I wrote it, maybe a week before that. And I started on it. So the date on, I don't know which one it is. But that's around the time that it was.
Exhibit 3, page 3.
Exhibit 3, page 3. Yeah, it would be this date, 10/3/19.
Okay.
So probably at the beginning of October.
And I'm also,
Probably began it even before that.
I'm also curious, and help me if my understanding is incorrect, but there was terms that you had to abide by with the Arizona
Yes.
board, and then terms with our board. And your argument is that because they're similar, that we should acknowledge those in our decision-making. But I'm wondering if you could tell me if there's any different terms that you're aware of.
They're totally similar. The only thing different is.
Yes, please.
The California boards check something about a course to take. And that's the only thing that the Arizona board didn't request. And the Arizona board maybe even requested more things what the California board had, but I tried to, compare them side by side to see that I met the disciplinary stipulations.
And just lastly, just open-endedly,
Okay.
why do you feel like this is the time now to come back and ask for your license? For you?
Well, I moved back here, basically, my daughter moved back here, and we moved as grandparents to be babysitters, and, I just don't know what the future holds. My investments could go bad, I'm going to stay in California. It'd be very difficult to go back to a job and have to go, I'm going to be late today because I have to go for drug screening. When it was my own practice, it was easy, I didn't have to ask anybody, so. And I'd like to clear my name. I mean, I did the work, and I would like my license, to be without any restrictions.
Thank you.
Disciplinary restrictions.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just, you had said that the psychiatrist you had gone to most recently didn't feel offered you very much. And the question is, do you plan to go back or try and find a new psychiatrist? Do you plan to continue with any type of psychiatric therapy going forward?
No. And the reason for that is truthfully, I continue with the psychiatrist because I was getting prescriptions for Lunesta, and I needed a psychiatrist to write that prescription. My original psychiatrist, Dr. Zwag, she said it was very important to have good sleep, but he died maybe like 3 years ago, and I just decided, I was sleeping fine. I tried it without the Lunesta, so I was good. And I'm really stable on my medicines, so I don't think there's any reason to go. I mean, I can't discuss my marijuana use with them or my lack of use. There's really no issues that I really need to deal with right now.
Thank you.
Dr. Adanian?
Oh, no questions.
Dr. Samuto?
I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming forward today and in pursuit of your license clearing it up. You had mentioned that you didn't want it sort of hanging over your head.
Right.
And you've taken the steps which were imposed by the Arizona Board. How much time do you have left on our
I don't,
time?
I have, according to your board, if I want to start practicing again, I'd have 5 years. It's a 5-year probation.
Oh, it starts 5 years from the time of
It hasn't
restatement.
started, it's been told because I'm
Got
out
it.
of state, so I never specifically have answered to the Osteopathic Medical Board of California, other than sending my quarterly reports, change of addresses, change of practice locations.
Thank you.
Ms. Williams?
So you can practice in Arizona, though, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's the only question I have. Thank you.
And Ms. Mercado?
Hi, thank you for being here. We have some students here, and wanted to ask you if you can tell us, what was the biggest lesson learned, and where do you see yourself, let's say, you are practicing 5-10 years from now? Like, what kind of commitment are you bringing to your
I'm sorry, I'm trying
I'll shorten the question. What kind of add-on are you going to, what kind of added value are you going to bring to the profession if you were to go back and practice?
I think that I've always been a good physician. I think that I practice good medicine, and I think that that stands on its own feet. I have more empathy for people with problems. I know that it's very hard to treat depression. I think the really important part about my treatment of my depression and my hypomania, as I was told, was also part of my diagnosis by Dr. Glacken, was that it required daily treatment. I mean, I had treatment in my first treatment center for it was more than 4 weeks, probably closer to 6 weeks, and the second one was 4 weeks. And I really found when you hear people say, I have to go to the psychiatrist once a week, once a month, and they only want to work from 8 to 5, it's really hard to get appropriate psychiatric treatment. I think if you really want to treat your depression, you really have to use appropriate medication with some form of therapy. And I think that in general, the average person can't afford the kind of, therapy that I had. I mean, the things that I did were very expensive. You can't just check yourself in for 1 month into a psychiatric, facility and have your problems worked on. So that's it. I mean, there's, big problem in just something so common as depression, and how poorly it's really understood, and how everyone goes, here, take your Zoloft, take your Prozac, here, your sertraline now, rather than your Zoloft. It's just more complicated than that.
Do you see
So more hospitals, more intensive daily, more frequent therapy with a trained professional in psychiatric.
Great. So do you feel like you're ever going to put anybody in danger if you were to go back and practice?
Oh, absolutely not.
Will you put yourself in danger if you have a bad day?
I'm sorry?
Will you put yourself in danger if you have a bad day at the office?
No.
And do you see yourself as a role model moving forward?
Yes, I do see myself as a role model. I see that, first of all, I accomplished becoming a physician, and two, I overcame, an addiction, which is very hard to do. The question was, is my practice going to survive? I was in solo practice. When I get back, my practice survived. So it means I came back better, and my patients felt that I still had something to offer for them. So I'm proud of that.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And any questioning from Mr. Gatchett?
I have a few. All right, the mic's on here. I think the board did cover actually a number of the questions I normally would ask, but I do have a few questions for you. So you're living in California now?
Yes,
How long have you been back in the state?
since February 1st of last year.
And during that almost approximately 10 months, did you start practicing medicine at any time?
No,
Did you attempt to comply with any of the terms of probation that the Osteopathic Medical Board of California imposed on your license?
yes, I've continued to send my quarterly reports.
What about the other terms that have been told?
I I've completed them all, as I said, except for the one about a course.
And you're talking about completing the Arizona probation requirements. I guess,
Well, that's completing the California one. There's one stipulation in the California document that talks about taking a course.
I think we're going to have to, it's maybe semantics here, but when you're completing biological fluid testing, you were doing that with the Arizona Osteopathic Medical
Right.
Board, is that correct?
Right.
You never biologically fluid tested with the California Medical Board, or Osteopathic Medical Board?
No.
Okay. And so, when you did a drug diversion program, you did that with the Arizona Osteopathic Medical Board?
Yes.
You didn't do that with the California Osteopathic Medical Board?
No.
You didn't submit to a board-approved, this board, California Osteopathic Medical Board, approved psychotherapist, or for an evaluation with this board?
No.
Those evaluations were done with the Arizona board?
Yes.
Okay. And you understand the decision and order of the Osteopathic Medical Board that was entered in August of 2009, approximately 11 years ago. That decision has remained tolled because you've been working out of state, and then when you've returned to California, you've not been working. You understand that?
Right.
And you understand that was a 5-year probation?
Yes.
And you agreed to the terms of that decision and order, is that correct?
Yes.
And you understood the tolling requirements and understood when you signed the decision, the stipulation that would become the decision in order with the Osteopathic Medical Board, that if you were working out of state, that probation would remain tolled.
Right. So it didn't ask me to submit yours to California or other, disciplinary orders that you mentioned.
Great. Couple terms I just want to talk about. One of the terms in the California Osteopathic Medical Board's decision was to keep a prescribing or dispensing list of all controlled substances while on probation. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
Did you do that term for the Arizona board?
Arizona has an online prescription document. In recent years. The pharmacy board, I think, oversees that. They send you a report every 3 months of how your specialty compares to others in your specialty on the number of controlled substances you're writing, usually narcotics and sleeping medications.
And that's a statewide report, very similar to Cures here in California?
Yes.
Okay, but the term that was part of your probation was that you would actually keep your own log, separate and apart from Cures, separate and apart from what Arizona does. Did you accomplish that term in Arizona as part of their probation? Did you keep a separate log yourself?
No.
And we already kind of covered this. You never underwent a psychiatric evaluation by an osteopathic, California Osteopathic Board appointed physician here in California under term 6 of your decision and order. Is that correct?
My psychiatrists were not approved or submitted for approval to California.
Right. And your psychotherapy that you received in Arizona, that was never approved by this board, the California Osteopathic
No, it
Medical Board? And that therapist was never approved by this board?
Right.
I noticed in Exhibit 10, and I'm going to have you turn there if you can for me, Doctor, page, starts at AGO 80. Specifically, I'm looking at AGO 81 and AGO 82. There's writing on the documentation that says the word misquoted. Do you recognize that handwriting?
Yes, it's mine.
And when did you write this?
I don't remember. Obviously, after I got this report went to my attorneys at the time. If you see at the top, Kimmerer and Direct PC, those were my attorneys. So they gave this to me. So I'm not really sure. Obviously, it was probably within 6 months of receiving this report or when it was written.
And when you wrote the word misquoted, were you disagreeing with the statements that he was placing at where you bracketed?
Yes, I thought that it was, I actually thought it was amusing that he said I was using nasal decongestants for their stimulant effect.
Is that still your position today?
Yes.
And this doctor that did this evaluation, Dr. Suker, can you give us the nexus of why he was doing this evaluation?
Why he was requested. It was my understanding that he was the go-to doctor that the Medical Board of Arizona used and the Osteopathic Medical Board of Arizona used for all their substance abuse cases.
Okay. And so he was appointed by the Arizona Osteopathic Medical Board to do an evaluation?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And on page 82, there's some more information where it's written misquoted. Where it's written misquoted, do you still take the position that those statements that you bracketed are misquoted as you sit here today?
This was January of 2000, so it was, I don't know why I wrote that. I did admit that he took offense when as recently as Monday, November 26th. He has not had any alcohol for over 1 month. I don't know why I wrote that.
Okay. So as you sit here today, you don't have an independent basis on at least page 82 regarding the addition of the word misquoted.
Right.
We can only assume that at the time, would it be fair to say
Well,
that,
oh, okay.
would it be fair to say at the time that you reviewed this document and entered that information, you disagreed with some of those statements?
Right, I can't justify that right now.
Okay. I'm going to turn you to Exhibit 14, page AGO 94, Dr. Shapiro, if you would do me a favor and just turn to that page. This is a discharge summary from one of the treatment programs, I believe. It was sent, at least it has a date stamp on top of January 23rd, 2007. There's a sticky note that's in the middle, at least a Xerox copy of the sticky note, and that was the copy that I received as part of the petition packet. Is that your handwriting on the sticky note?
Yes, it is.
And do we know why, as part of your petition, you provided a document that had a sticky note over a large portion of the writing?
I think she must have written something that said that I wasn't putting enough emphasis on my recovery. And I just thought at the time that I was, placing a lot of emphasis on my recovery, and that it was the first thing, first priority in my life at that time. And I thought, I was getting better balanced, through my treatment at the Meadows. They use the word balance, but they don't want you to be too excited or too down. And, they kind of like to rate, your depression on a scale of 1 to 10, and they like to see that you're balanced.
Was treatment easy for you when you first entered it, or did you find it to be difficult?
I found the treatment at the Meadows not difficult. I found it very educational. There was a lot more camaraderie between the patients. The treatment center at Keystone, that was very intense. Had to deal with a lot of childhood issues. That was very, very difficult. And I know that I had difficulty with the Meadows too. I had to have a lot of anxiety because I would remember they would always take my heart rate and it would always be high. And I would go, geez, my heart rate's usually like 60 or 70. Why is it 100? So I think it was always 100 when I was in the Meadows because there was anxiety. So I think the Meadows was not nearly as difficult as the treatment at Keystone. And Keystone dealt with much more shameful issues.
And I don't want to go too deeply into some of those issues, but, giving us a summary would be helpful. When you were using marijuana, what were some of the shameful behaviors that you were experiencing or exhibiting that potentially were a danger to you as a practitioner and a danger to patients?
I had a sexual addiction, and I think I put myself in danger and my wife in danger because I wasn't necessarily practicing safe sex. And, I'm ashamed that I did that. you do it, and as the typical addiction thing goes, you do it again and again, expecting it to be better the next time, so you do it again. But smoking pot and using prostitutes just didn't get me any place. It was just, it just was a cycle of abuse.
In reading your narrative statement, it's my understanding that that behavior never entered into your practice with patients in terms of either the sexual addiction behavior or the smoking of pot.
No, it didn't.
You had stated earlier today that November 2006 was the last time you smoked marijuana. When was the last time you consumed alcohol?
November 24th, 2006.
And aside from marijuana and alcohol, and not including prescriptions, have you ever, or when was the last time you took an illicit drug prior to today?
Never, none. Not since, before November 2006.
And I believe you had testified earlier that you did take prescription medication for an infection. When was that last taken?
Probably April, this is 2020, either April 2017, I think it was April 2017.
And what medication were you on and for how long?
I was on a lot of medication for a long time. I was on Rocephin, and then I got acute interstitial nephritis from that. I was on,
And specifically,
they had a difficult time isolating the organism.
specifically, I know, I'm not going to cut you, I don't want to cut you off here, but I don't really want to get into the antibiotics you were on. I'm more concerned with the controlled substance that you were on at that time and how long you were on.
I had prescriptions, I really used the only thing, I got more relief taking 4 Advil than I did taking 10 milligrams of hydrocodone. And opiates, not to be, smart, being rude or anything, opiates didn't do anything for me. I mean, when you're an addict, you find a drug that you like, and that's the drug you use. I mean, I tried using alcohol to get off of pot, but it didn't work because alcohol didn't do for me what pot did for me. And I'm not saying that what it was doing was good for me, but with my rationalization at the time, that was the drug that I turned to.
Marijuana in Arizona, I'm going to have to rely on you because I don't know the law. As of February of 2018 and before that time, was marijuana legal for recreational use in Arizona?
No, it's still not.
And I believe one of the board members did raise with you that marijuana now is legal recreationally here in California. You
Right.
could go and choose to use it. You can grow your own plants. You've stated that you would not return to it. What assurances to the board can you provide beyond your own just promises that you won't return to marijuana in terms of whether your support network or how you would not actually begin using it again, since it is a legal recreational drug here?
I just promise, that I wouldn't use it. There's no other assurance that I can give them.
You didn't voluntarily check yourself in once you moved to California in a program like Pacific Assistance Group here in California, which is outside of the board's control, but does volunteer drug testing once you were back in California. Is that correct?
Yes,
You haven't done any drug testing since you were removed from your Arizona probation, I'm guessing in 2012?
yes.
You have or you have
No, I
not?
haven't.
Okay, thank you. And while you were on your Arizona probation, this is not going to require an exact number, but approximately in the 5 years you were on Arizona probation, approximately how many urine drug tests did you provide to that board?
It was twice every month.
So 24 times in a year, so 24 times 5, let's say just over 100 tests?
Yes.
And of those
Don't
100,
trust your math.
of those 100 tests, just over 100 tests, did you have any positive results?
No,
And were they testing for just marijuana, or were they testing for marijuana, illicit drugs, and alcohol?
I don't know what they tested for.
Okay, they never told you under the panel?
No.
And then you said you went to NA meetings from 2006 to 2014. Approximately how many meetings did you go to during that time? I'm sure it fluctuated, but you can give me an estimate.
Well, I did 90. I went 3 times a week, minimum 3 times a week, through the 5 years of my probation. After my probation was over, I tended to go on Saturdays, and then occasionally one of my friends would call me that was also an addict, and we would go to maybe a church meeting that they were interested in going to during the week. So I was good at science, I was not good at math.
Any reason, since you moved back to California, and you would agree that at this point you've been retired from the practice of medicine, any reason that you haven't gone to those meetings just to even provide support to other people dealing with addictions as a way of rehabilitation or giving back?
No.
Have you made any attempts to speak to doctors groups or people seeking licensure as osteopathic medical doctors as part of rehabilitation in the last 3 years about overcoming addiction?
Any fellow doctors?
Correct. Did you ever take an ethics course with the Arizona Board of Osteopathic Medicine as part of your probation?
No.
How about a boundaries course? Did you ever take a boundaries course with the Arizona Board of Osteopathic Medicine?
There was a lot of boundary discussion when I was at the Meadows. And there was also boundaries at Keystone. Remember, they were very particular about not touching anybody, without their permission. And obviously, boundaries as they relate to my addictions.
You would agree that sometimes medicine can be stressful. I know that you've stated that your support network includes now your wife. You're between psychiatrists at this point. Would you seek psychotherapy even with not a psychiatrist if you felt that the situation was becoming stressful in practicing medicine again? For example, would you seek with a behavioral health or a psychologist?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm speaking too fast. Would you seek help with another licensee like a psychologist or behavioral health specialist if you felt that the stress of medicine was increasing to the point that you couldn't handle it? And the answer?
I'm sorry. So you were speaking to her?
Well, I was.
And I kind of spaced.
Sure, I get it. I was referring to her because sometimes I talk fast, especially, and it's difficult when an attorney is sitting next to the witness, because we're having a conversation and tend to speak up. So I'm going to rephrase it for you. I know you're between psychiatrists right now, but if you would agree with me, the practice of medicine can be stressful.
Yes.
And I know that your support network includes your wife.
And
friends, and your daughter, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And your daughter's a physician assistant, so she has medical training.
Yes.
Okay. And so you would listen to her advice if she said, hey, Dad, I think you're having a hard time right now.
Yes.
Okay. But she's a family member, and sometimes we don't really want to listen to our children. I know I don't listen to mine, even though they tell me what to do. They're 3 and 7, but.
They'll grow up and stop hugging you.
Right. My question to you is this, though. Would you seek therapy from, let's say, not a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a behavioral health specialist, a licensed a family therapist? Would you do that?
Yes.
Okay. And when would you do that? When would you make that determination that you need to get help?
I think my trigger would be feeling of depression. I think as long as I can keep my mood balanced, that I can wake up every day and be happy, I think, those would be the things to me that would tell me. And probably if I went out and smoked a joint or something, I'd probably go back to therapy. I'd probably start, Narcotic Anonymous meetings again if I went out and used.
If you smoked a joint, and let's say the board granted you a free and clear license, would you report that to the board on your own voluntarily?
First of all, why would I?
Okay.
I mean, I'm saying I wouldn't do it, but if I did it and my license was clear and it's a legal drug in California, why would I report it to the board?
Okay, and I would make the same, I'd let you have this just chance to respond to this. If you were an alcoholic and the board gave you a free and clear license, and then you went out and drank after promising the board that you would not drink, I would ask the same question of an alcoholic. Would you self-report to the board? It's a legal substance. Your license is free and clear, but you've been a licensee who has had an addiction problem. So I will ask the question again. If you were to go out and start smoking marijuana again, would you report, because of your past addiction with marijuana, would you report that to the board?
The way you phrase it, yes.
And you understand that?
Yes, I
That just
do.
because it's a legal substance, that there is an obligation on you as a practitioner to make that report to the board.
Right, okay, phrase like that, you are right.
Okay, I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Dr. Shapiro, for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gatchett. So at this time, Dr. Shapiro, do you have any other documents you wish to present? Any witnesses, anything like that?
Want me to bring my wife up?
It's entirely up to you, but if not, because we have another petition hearing that was scheduled for 10:30. All right, good morning to you, ma'am.
It's my wife, Ethel.
Okay, and you wish for her to testify on your behalf?
I think she can testify about my behavior and the way I've been, yes.
Okay, and let me just ask, Dr. Adamian, did you have any other questions? Because you kind of nudged me. Okay. Okay, so your questions have been satisfied. All right, so ma'am, I'm going to put you under oath, so if you could kindly raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, ma'am, if you could kindly state and spell your name for the record, and you got to speak in that microphone, otherwise folks cannot hear you.
My name is Ethel Shapiro. Spell it Ethel. Shapiro is Shapiro.
All right, Mrs. Shapiro, what is it you would like to tell the board this morning?
That being with my husband and working with him as a professional and going through his challenges in our life and retiring, I feel that he has done a lot of his work, his mental work, his work as far as being a human. And I think that I feel he should be honored for his work in Arizona to provide him with his license back. He's a good doctor, meaning he's very informative, and I think he has a value to the students of the Osteopathic medical organization. So, I just hope that you would consider giving his license back so that he can feel complete in his, as we get older, we want, our lives cleared so we can enjoy our grandchildren and enjoy life again. And I believe that he's worked very hard for that. And we all have as a unit in our family. And that's all I can say.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Shapiro. Any questions from the board? No questions? Okay. Any other witnesses?
No.
All right, so that concludes our petition hearing in this matter. The record is closed, the case is submitted, and we are off the record, and we will proceed, depending upon what the board would like to do, if they'd like to take a break, but we will proceed with the next petition if not. Thank you. Good luck to you, sir.
5-minute bathroom break, and we'll be back with our next petitioner shortly. Machiko, Can you enter into the record that I did get a text from Dr. Lally? He sends his apologies for not being here today. He is detained in a deposition all day long, so he's busy working.
There we go.
Dr. Lally is our independent consultant. He's a physician who has his own practice, and he reviews cases for us as they come forward. And it's nice to have he used to be a board member, and then he took the position of independent consultant when we lost our previous consultant. Okay, I'll turn the microphone back over to Judge Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zamuto. So this is our second petition hearing of the morning, and this is in the matter of Peter Hugh, Dr. Hugh. Good morning to you, sir. So we'll get on the record, and I will call the matter. We are here this morning before the Osteopathic Medical Board of California in the matter of Dr. Peter Hugh, H-U-G-H. My name is Danette Brown, and I'm the Administrative Law Judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I've been assigned to hear these matters. Would the members of the board kindly introduce themselves on the record, please, starting with your first and last names, and we'll just go down the line, starting to my far right.
Dr. Elizabeth Jensen.
Andrew Moreno.
Dr. Cyrus Buhari.
Gloria Damian.
Dr. Joseph Zamuto.
Cheryl Williams.
Claudia Mercado.
And Dr. Zamuto, is a quorum of the members present here this morning?
Yes, we are, Your Honor.
Okay, so here's our second petition and our last petition of the morning. This is the matter of the petition for reduction of penalty against Peter C. Hugh, Dr. Hugh. This is agency case number 900-2015-000057. OAH number 2019110-866. May I take the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General, please?
Good morning, Your Honor, and board members. John Gatchett, Deputy Attorney General here in Sacramento, appearing before the board in this hearing pursuant to the Government Code.
Thank you, sir. And Doctor, if you could kindly introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Peter Hugh, H-U-G-H.
And Dr. Hugh is the petitioner in this matter. Dr. Hugh, you are choosing to represent yourself here this morning?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, sir. And you are aware that you could have had an attorney represent you?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Gatchett has hopefully informed you, I'm sure he did because he represented to me that he did, that he talked to you prior to getting on the record about the proceeding in this matter.
Yes.
So briefly, just to tell you a little bit about the process here, the board is concerned with hearing about your rehabilitation since your license was placed on probation. And the Deputy Attorney General will proceed first to provide basically an orientation in this matter. And after that, you will have the right to make a presentation of your case, which involves your petition packet, and explain away why you believe that your probation should be either terminated early or you should be reinstated, whatever the case may be. You may also call witnesses to testify on your behalf. And any of your witnesses, including yourself, will be subject to any questioning by the board or Mr. Gatchett during the course and scope of this proceeding. Again, the board is particularly concerned with rehabilitation that you may have engaged in after your license was placed on probation. And you are reminded that the board has had the benefit of reading the petition packet, so you don't necessarily have to repeat anything in that packet unless you want to make some kind of emphasis on something in that packet. After the hearing, the board will go into closed session to deliberate, and you won't receive a decision today, but you will, sometime in the future in the mail. Any questions at all about the process in this matter?
No. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hugh. At this time, I'd like to put you under oath, so if you could kindly raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. And if you could just kindly, we have a court reporter taking down everything that you say, so if you could just kindly speak loudly into the microphone and slowly. And that goes for you, Mr. Gatchett, as well.
As always.
Okay. So, Mr. Gatchett, at this time, a brief orientation or introduction into this case, please.
So, Your Honor and the board members, the decision and order in this case is actually Exhibit 3, and so you can read it a little bit more at your leisure. It is kind of a lengthy accusation, but I hope to provide a brief summary here. Patient J.K. was treated by respondent starting in 2006. And I'll use the term respondent and petitioner kind of interchangeably, just referring back to the accusation. Petitioner was treating patient J.K. for chronic pain following a car accident where J.K. had had a spinal fusion. Between 2011 and February of 2013, petitioner continued to treat patient J.K. Patient J.K. suffered from pain, anxiety, and depression. During that time, petitioner prescribed Vicodin, benzodiazepines, and Ambien to patient J.K. Patient J.K. died of an acetaminophen overdose in February of 2013. At the time of her death, petitioner was repeatedly prescribing early refills of Vicodin to patient J.K. In the accusation, at one point, about a month before her death, it was figured that based on the tablets of the early refills and the prescriptions she was filling, she was approaching 6.5 grams of acetaminophen. And that is potentially a lethal amount. Petitioner was aware that patient J.K. was an alcoholic, that she often overused medication. He was aware that he was prescribing benzos in combination with opiates to her, and he ignored the fact that she was in treatment and continued her prescriptions. One of the things in the accusation that was listed was that a treatment facility had reached out, and his response when she was in treatment was, well, the hydrocodone or the Vicodin was medically necessary, required while she was in that, and so that prescription was continued. Petitioner did acknowledge at the time of his interview with the board that his care involving patient J.K. was below the standard of care because the records were often inaccurate, incomplete, duplicative, and improperly interchanged the word continue and refill, which had often allowed for patient J.K. to both hoard and overuse Vicodin pills. Petitioner was placed on probation for the conduct that had occurred on September 22nd, 2017, for approximately 5 years. He completed and has completed a clinical competency program during that time and been monitored through affiliated monitors. Affiliated monitors, in fact, has discharged him from their program, and they did that as of September 30th, 2019, having successfully completed the training and requirements that he needed to bring his prescribing in line with the standard of care. He also completed the pharmacology coursework as part of his probation. He is in compliance with his terms and conditions of probation as he sits here before you today with this petition. At this point, Your Honor, would you like me to enter the exhibits?
Yes, please.
All right. And so I'm going to speak a little slower so the reporter is not angry with me. What we have here is Exhibit 1, which is the petition provided by the petitioner in this matter. Ask that be marked and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 1 and admitted.
Exhibit 2 is the narrative statement written by the petitioner. I'd ask that be marked and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 2 and admitted.
Exhibit 3 is the decision and order of this board effective September 22nd, 2017, with the attached accusation setting forth in more detail the statements that I just made. Ask that be marked and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 3 and admitted.
Exhibit 4 are letters of recommendation, one from Dr. Koa, K-H-O-A, Doe, D-O, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine, and the other is from Dr. Eric Chung, CHEUNGDO, as required by the statute. Ask that these, oh, and there's one more too. Dr. NGAN, I don't know how to pronounce that, sir. Dr. Hugh, how do you pronounce that last name? Okay. A medical doctor. Ask those three letters be marked and moved into evidence as part of the case.
Marked as Exhibit 4 and admitted.
Exhibit 5 are certificates of completion for the medical record keeping course and prescribing course. Ask those be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 5 and admitted.
Exhibit 6 are the quarterly reports provided by Dr. Hugh to the board, showing that he's in compliance with probation. Ask those be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 6 and admitted.
Exhibit 7 are the affiliated monitor reports. They're both the initial assessment report and the reports that were done on a quarterly basis until he completed that program. Ask that Exhibit 7 be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 7 and admitted.
Exhibit 8 is an award from Humana, Humana, that petitioner received. Ask that that be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 8 and admitted.
Exhibit 9 is a letter from Blue Shield Insurance notifying petitioner that with his license being placed on probation, his insurance contract was being terminated. That's dated September 11th, 2017. Ask that letter be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 9 and admitted.
Exhibit 10 is the receipt for costs showing that petitioner has paid his restitution costs in this case. Ask that be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Marked as Exhibit 10 and admitted.
Exhibit 11 is the Breeze certificate, license certificate documents as well. And may I approach?
You may.
I have Exhibit 11A, which is the certificate of licensure. I'd ask that both of those documents be marked and moved into evidence for jurisdictional purposes.
Marked as Exhibit 11 and 11A, and are both, you're asking that both be admitted?
Yes.
Okay, so, and both are admitted.
And then Exhibit 12 is the notice of hearing in this matter. Ask that it be marked for identification and moved into evidence for jurisdictional purposes.
Marked as Exhibit 12 and admitted for jurisdictional purposes.
And I have nothing else from the packet to move into evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Gatchett. Now, Dr. Hugh, it's your opportunity to present your case. And again, you're going to testify on your own behalf. At least that's what we anticipate. And you're reminded that the board has reviewed your packet. And if there's anything else you'd like to add in addition to that, kindly provide that testimony. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. 7 years ago, I cared for a patient, a 35 years old female who come into my practice, had spinal fracture due to a motor vehicle accident and had metal plates placed in his neck. She came in already on opiate medication for pain. So I just continued the opiate medication. And then one day, she showed up in the ER with a liver enzyme sky high. And it turns out she took 77 tablets of Vicodin ES in the apparent suicidal attempt. And despite the doctors and nurses' help, we were not able to keep her alive. She expired a week later. So later on, we look at why this happened. It turns out that the pharmacist would fax a refill of the Vicodin to me, and it's time to refill, so I refill them. And then the next day, I will receive a request for a refill for Vicodin electronically, e-prescribing. So I just thought the pharmacist might not, probably the fax machine didn't shake hands and didn't receive my fax. So I okayed those Vicodin refill as well. And this pharmacy, for some reason, he would give the Vicodin right away after receiving my fax, and then hold my electronic approval for 10 days, and give the patient another 100 of Vicodin. And so it's, in essence, the patient is receiving double dose of opiate medication. So because this, I was cited by the board to be negligent and overprescribing. And because of this incident, I institute a lot of changes to my practice. I no longer prescribe opiate medication to my patients. If they need a long-term opiate medication, I refer them to a pain management doctor. I use other modality to treat a chronic pain patient, osteopathic manipulation, acupuncture, physical therapy, whatever is necessary for their pain. I check frequently on the cures report on the patients on on other medication, controlled substance other than opiates. And so I believe this will help prevent similar things happen again. And also, I fulfill every aspect of the stipulated settlement. I pay all the recovery costs. I attended all the classes, 2 classes, one for pharmacy, one for medical record keeping. And I kept all my records for the controlled substance prescription. And I also finished the monitoring process. The monitor is board approved, and she would check on my medical record every 3 months and give me full feedback how to prescribe safely and keep an effective medical record keeping. So in the end of the monitor period, and she commented that I make significant impacts, significant improvement on my medical practice. And also the people, my peers, they see my improvements. I was elected department chair of my family practice department of my local hospital just recently. So I'm coming here today to ask Your Honor and the board to terminate my probation early because of 3 reasons. Number 1 reason, 2 years ago when I was put on probational period, Blue Shield terminated my membership. Blue Shield is very large health insurance in California. It represents 1/3 of my patient population. All of a sudden, I was out of 1/3 income from the practice. And also, a lot of my patients is Blue Shield members, so they have to terminate my relationship. A lot of patients, I've been seeing them for 20 years. All of a sudden, they lost their doctor. And they still want to come back to my practice. and I still want to see them. And it's only possible if you terminate my probation, and then the Bushel will instate my membership, and I will able to continue to see them, and I want to see them. Second reason is because I lost 1/3 of my incomes. I cannot give a raise to my staff. Some of my staff left, so I have a rapid turnover for my practice, and it impacts negatively to my patient care. When you have all the new staff constantly coming to practice, they don't know the routines, so a patient complains, and it's not a good situation. So if you will terminate my probation, I will get the reinstate membership and Bushel. Hopefully, my income will come up, and I will able to give raise to my staff. And thirdly, because of lost income, I haven't been able to upgrade my equipment and computers for the last 2 years. My computer is 10 years old, and they keep freezing, and this impact negatively to my patient care. So, because above reasons, and I really like the board to terminate my probation early. I made a mistake 7 years ago, and I am remorseful for a mistake I made. And I have instituted changes to my practice to ensure this kind of thing never happen again. And I ask the board and your honor to terminate my probation early, so I can better serve my patient and continue to have keep my patient to coming back to my practice, so I continue to give them quality care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hugh. At this time, I will ask if the board has any questions of you, starting with my far right, Dr. Jensen.
No questions at this time.
Mr. Marino?
Hello, doctor. I'm wondering if you can describe and tell me how you then and now understand pain management in regards to patients that may come to you in pain, and how you now see that.
I would treat the person looking at what was the problem. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of modalities you can use, anti-inflammatory, muscle relaxants. I would do OM, osteopathic manipulation if it's back pain, neck pain, and physical therapy. If they really need opiate, that kind of medication, I'll refer them to the pain management doctor.
You've taken the position that you will no longer prescribe opioids, is that correct? Or in limited circumstances?
Yes. Well, unless a patient comes in with a fracture, mm-hmm. that kind of thing, I'll give them limited supplies of medication. And last 2 years, I wrote 2 prescriptions for opiate medications because fracture, I mean, you still need to care for the patient, but other than that, I just don't want to prescribe that kind of medication. It's just personal preference.
Okay.
I just won't touch those.
Okay. I also read in the board packet that we have that Some of the some of the notes that were given were in regards to your note taking, inaccurate entries, signing notes in a timely fashion, using correct terminology between refill and continue. And I'm wondering if you can tell me, how has your note taking improved?
A lot of improvements. I itemize each problem, what my treatment, what tests, and as you know, you are no longer able to electronically transmit the refill for opiates nowadays. You have to physically give that person a paper prescription, so that similar things just won't happen, cannot happen in today's practice environment.
You stated earlier that as a result of the patient expiring, you used the word remorseful. And I'm wondering if you can tell me how what occurred affected you personally, outside of your practice, just as a person. How did that affect you, if it did at all?
Yes, that person died, someone died, and I contribute to it. And because my carelessness, I nowadays I won't do double approve. I either approve electronically or fax. I won't do both.
Did you take any courses during your probation so far?
Yes, I took 2 courses. One is in pharmacy, one is medical record keeping.
And did you find those to be beneficial?
Yes, very, very helpful.
Can you tell me what were some takeaways from you?
Like I said, with each problem, I listed what I'm going to do, what prescription, what X-ray. Before, I just all the problem list, one section, and medication in one section, and not itemize them. So it prevent error to occur. So this has been really helpful.
I'm going to try to phrase this as I have the question in my head. If the board were to grant and reinstate your license, do you feel that because of what occurred, you may actually end up becoming a more safer practitioner?
Because because the changes I have made on the medical records,
yes,
it's a lot safer to practice medicine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Bahari?
I have no questions.
Dr. Adamian?
How long was she in your care before she passed? How long was she in your care before she passed?
7 years.
Has there been other incidences, similar incidences, that we're not aware of?
Similar incidents, I'm not sure what.
Of an overdose or similar incidences?
No.
In the
No,
past or
that
in
was
the current?
the only one, and then it's fatal.
Thank you.
Dr. Zamora?
Thank you, Doctor, for being here. It's probably one of the hardest things a physician goes through in their life is the unexpected death of a patient, because we're always taught that to do no harm. Sometimes patients die because of what we do. Sometimes patients die in spite of what we do. I guess the question that comes into my mind is there any red signs that could have detected that she was a patient who was at risk for depression, at risk for suicide? Because had there been something that you could have done ahead of time, for instance, at that time, were you doing any urine drug screens?
No, I wasn't.
And have you learned about the benefit of drug screens yet?
Yes, I have.
At that time, were you doing physician-patient pain contracts?
I did have a contract with him, with her.
Okay. At that time, did you do a risk assessment for potential of addiction?
Risk assessment, not formally, but I know it's, she could be a problem. I also thought about discharge her from my practice, but her father came to my practice for a long time, and we have a very good relationship. I just didn't feel right to just terminate her from my practice. I feel uncomfortable for her opiate medications.
At what point in the 7 years that you took care of her were you aware of her addictive potentials and risks?
Last 2 years, I attempt to take her off, and for a month she was actually off. But then she came back and said, "I have too much pain. I cannot do it." Then
Did you talk to her at that time about seeing a pain specialist or psychologist or
I just sent
psychiatrist?
her to a pain management doctor, but she didn't go.
So she wasn't following your medical advice? Is that what you're saying? Well, on those grounds alone, because she was not compliant to your treatment,
Exactly, that's my mistake. I should have terminated her right there, but because, like I said, because of her whole family, I care for her mother, I care for her father for a long time before she came to my practice. So-
well, in spite of them, you have to look at the risks to the patient. And I think that if you have concerns and she's not compliant, then the patient-doctor relationship requires you to do something about that non-compliance.
Yes, you're correct. I should have put my foot down and say, "That's it, you're out of my practice."
So have you gone through an ethics course yet as part of your remediation?
Ethic course, we cover ethics on our medical, in the pharmacy class about the opiate prescribing.
What type of practice do you currently have?
Family practice.
Do you practice alone? Do you have partners?
I practice with my wife. She's a pediatrician.
She's a pediatrician?
Right.
Okay. Do you have any nurse practitioners or physician assistants?
We have a nurse practitioner, but she doesn't come in like half a day a week.
How many days a week does your wife work?
She works 4 days a week,
How many days a week do you work?
5 days a week.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Williams?
I have no questions.
Ms. Mercado?
Yes, you said 1/3 of your patients are no longer part of your practice because they can't use Blue Shield, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
About how many patients is that have been left without your service? You said it was 1/3 of your practice. How big is your practice?
It's difficult to say sometimes. I tell you the truth, I cannot really tell you the number because My practice probably 1,000 to 2,000 people.
Mhm.
Yeah, so at least 300 or 400.
And what kind of time do you allocate to each patient's visit when they come to your practice?
20 minutes each patient.
And is that because it's sufficient time to determine what they need, or is that your time constraint for your practice?
It just the time allocated and the schedule.
Okay. If a patient require more time, are you willing to give them more time to
Yes,
talk
of
to them
course.
further about any
Yes.
issues? Do you have anybody in your office that can assist you? If any escalations were to happen or you needed more time?
No, usually it just probably backing up a little bit.
Okay.
I hope I probably catch up somehow. Hoping you come in with some simple cases so you catch up.
Okay. Is there any members of, anybody that you maybe go to for advice, like a mentor and an advisor, that's also a DO that maybe you can cross-reference some
Yes,
things that
we-
might be going
we-
on? Is that violating patient care if you talk, Dr. Smido?
I'm sorry.
If you talk to another physician about a patient, is that violating the patient care agreement? No?
This doctor and who also Dr. No, who is also a doctor in my church. I sometimes talk to my problems I face, and of course my wife too.
And can you tell the board, how do you keep learning new things as the profession changes? Do you go out of your way to maybe take courses
Oh, yes,
outside of
we have
practice or outside of
requirements.
what we required you?
We have requirements, 20 hours of A1 or AB, and then 50 hours others, so probably around 70 hours a year with attend CME.
Thank you so much. That's all, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Mercado. Mr. Gatchett, any questions on cross-examination?
Dr. Hugh, I'm going to have you look at Exhibit 3, which is the decision and order in this case. If you could look at page AG07 for me. You admitted that the conduct contained in the accusation was true and correct. Is that part of your acceptance in this stipulation?
Yes.
And turning you to page AGO13 in Exhibit 3, that's your signature accepting the stipulation?
Yes.
And you would agree, as you sit here today, looking back between 2011 and 2013, that your records for patient JK were below the standard of care?
That's correct.
And you've testified, and I just want to reiterate, that you would agree that the prescriptions that you prescribed to patient JK played a significant part in her death. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you would agree, as you sit here today, that you ignored some of the warning signs as you cared for patient JK between 2011 and 2013, which included early requests for refills, prior history of substance abuse, specifically with alcohol, and major mental health problems that she was dealing with. Is that correct?
Unknowingly, like I said, I said early, I didn't know the pharmacy would hold the fax, which would hold the electronic transmitted prescription and give to the patient on a later day. So, not purposely, but in reality, I did overprescribe, even though I didn't know at the time.
There were warning signs, though, that were contained in the accusation that I would point you to. For example, One time, JK in February 13th of 2012 told you her medications were stolen from her purse during an AA meeting, and you did not document that in her record. You would agree that typically when a patient who's on controlled substances, in this case Vicodin and Klonopin, tells you that their medications have been stolen, that is a red flag that should be looked into and should require further analysis by the practitioner. Is that fair?
You have to look at individual patients. You asked me a very general question.
Well, and I'm really concentrating in 2011 to 2013. You've stated that the warning signs from JK were unknowing to you, and I'm trying to see if you would agree with me that some of the warning signs were very known to you, and you kind of ignored them. Would that be a fair statement regarding a patient coming to you and saying their medication had been stolen and they're asking for an early refill?
Not purposely.
When a patient comes to you, do you always trust the statements that they give you?
Not really. I have to look at the person. I mean, if you look at a person's family and the report you and that person has.
I know that Dr. Zamudo had asked you about some of the things that we use to check patients on prescription medication. You stated that you now use your analysis. At the time between 2011 and 2013, your testimony was that you were not using your analysis?
That's correct.
If a patient were to come to you now and say their medication had been stolen, would you have them provide a urinalysis test to verify and ensure?
Of course.
There was other notes in here as well at page 25 mentioning of an accident that had occurred where she had crashed into a tree. The documentation, once again, wasn't very thorough. You didn't order an MRI or x-rays. There wasn't any explanation in that documented note regarding whether or not the medications had been responsible for the accident. When a patient is on narcotic medication, as well as sedatives and hypnotics, and they exhibit automobile accidents, would that be a potential warning sign or red flag of issues with their care?
You have to take in the person's totality of that person. Not every accident needs an X-ray. Not every accident needs an MRI.
And I guess my question generally, though, would that, as you as a practitioner, would that raise a red flag with you that maybe you should be looking at this patient more closely regarding their prescription medications?
Looking back right now, of course.
There were also notes in there, you said unknowingly refilled. I would note that at page 26, the medical record had stated, patient called requesting an early refill of Vicodin, requesting refill be called in ASAP to pharmacy. Please note that it is okay to refill early. Were there times that this patient was requesting beyond just, the pharmacy issuing prescriptions when you didn't want to issue prescriptions, where she was actually calling and asking you for refills of early medication?
Yes, once over a 7-year period.
Okay. During this time, you were prescribing both benzodiazepines and opiates in combination to this patient. Now looking back, based on the training you've received, what have you learned about the potential issues of prescribing opiates in combination with benzodiazepines?
It's very dangerous. That's why I don't prescribe them anymore.
And you've stated you don't prescribe opioids. Are you also still prescribing benzodiazepines?
Yes, and if I do, I would check the cure report very frequently, make sure they don't take more than they should.
Do you verify cures to ensure they're not receiving opioids from another source while you're prescribing benzodiazepines?
That's correct.
If you find a patient that you're prescribing benzodiazepines begins getting opioids from another source, are you able, or do you terminate them from your care?
I would look at that, whether it's medically necessary. Sometimes patients, there's a medical need for taking both, but you have to be very, very careful monitoring them and make sure they don't overuse them.
You stated it's very dangerous to combine benzodiazepines with opioids. Can you please tell us briefly what those dangers are?
They can potentiate the effect of either one of them, and then that could be very dangerous.
And by dangerous, do you mean it could increase respiratory depression and potential death?
That's correct.
What have you learned since this patient and since the care of this patient regarding prescribing benzodiazepines to an alcoholic?
It's not a good idea. But at the time, she told me she had quit using alcohol.
Why is it not a good idea, sir?
Same effects. It can potentiate the effects of benzodiazepine. I mean, narcotics, and make the effect of alcohol much worse.
Are you familiar with the current controlled substance guidelines published by the Medical Board of California?
I had read them.
And do you know approximately when they were published?
I can't recall the exact year.
If I told you they were published in November of 2014 and adopted by the Osteopathic Medical Board relatively closely after, would that help refresh your recollection as when they were published?
I believe you.
How could those guidelines have helped you in your care and treatment of patient JK?
I already said I failed in providing proper care to her.
Are you familiar with the current controlled substance guidelines published by the Centers for Disease Control?
Yes.
Do you know when they were published?
I don't know the date, sorry.
Would 2016 help refresh your recollection?
If you say that's a year, then I think it's correct.
You stated that none of your patients are on opioids for chronic pain at this point. You stated that you still prescribe opioids for 2 times in the last 2 years for fractures. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When you issued those prescriptions, what generally was that prescription and what did it look like? For example, how many pills did you issue and what quantity and strength?
I gave them 20, enough for them to use probably 5 days.
And we're using Vicodin or Percocet? Or Norco?
Norco.
And were those 5 milligram or 10 milligram?
5 milligrams.
At this point, do you prescribe opioids in combination with benzodiazepines?
No.
Do you prescribe opioids in combinations with soma, crispridol, muscle relaxers?
No.
Do you use muscle relaxers like crispridol, known also as soma, in your practice?
Very sparingly.
And when you prescribe that to a patient, how long do you prescribe that to a patient for?
Possibly 10 days.
I've heard often from practitioners that it's difficult to get specialist referrals to pain management physicians. In your community, are you able to make referrals to pain management physicians for patients that require chronic pain therapy?
Yes.
How quickly do you make those referrals when you realize a patient needs chronic pain therapy?
As soon as possible.
Do you use hypnotics like Ambien in your practice?
I have probably 2 patients on Ambien. No, 1. I just discontinue. I just discontinued the other one, so I have 1 patient on Ambien.
And you understand that Ambien itself and hypnotics like it can be habit-forming and are controlled substances?
Yes.
When would you terminate a patient in the future if they were violating your controlled substance regimen that you were providing them? What would be the factors that would go into that?
I would terminate them as soon as they break the rules.
And those rules are set forth, as you stated, in a controlled substance contract?
That's correct.
Now, you had a controlled substance contract with patient JK. What about patient JK's care and the controlled substance agreement that was with her, beyond the fact that her father was a patient, has changed in your practice such that you would actually enforce the terms of that contract?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Sure, I'll ask the question again. You testified that the reason you didn't terminate patient JK from your practice, despite the fact there was a controlled substance agreement, was that her father was a member of your practice. What about now, as you look back at the care that you provided to her, would the fact that her father had been a patient in the practice and she was violating the controlled substance agreement, would you have terminated her from your practice?
Without a doubt.
So you wouldn't let a personal relationship with another patient's family member dictate the care you were providing to the patient if they're violating their terms and conditions of their controlled substance agreement. Is that what you're telling us?
Absolutely.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gatchett. All right, Dr. Hugh, any other documents or other witnesses that you intend to testify on your behalf?
No, I don't.
Okay, so that being the case then, Mr. Gatchett, do you have anything to say in closing?
I think on balance, this is actually a relatively close case for a couple reasons. One, it involved one patient. There is no other evidence of behavior that this petitioner engaged in that was problematic before that case, and there's no evidence before the board of other cases since that time. Obviously, the standard of care has radically changed since 2011 to 2013 with the treatment of pain management, both with the medical board issuing its guidelines in late 2014 and this board adopting those, and the Centers for Disease Control issuing their guidelines in 2016. There are obviously things that this petitioner can be commended for. The fact that he went through the affiliated monitors program, and that is a very intensive program. He was very forthright based on the documentation. He was willing to learn, and he completed the program. So for that, I think he can very much be proud of the fact that he didn't have any hiccups during that process. At the same time, the competing issues are that this case is on more of the severe scale. This was not a situation where the petitioner was taking care of this patient for a short period of time. He took care of this patient for a long period of time. And while I understand the claims that he had that, he couldn't figure out why the pharmacy kept on refilling the medications, at the end of the day, as the captain of the ship, he was the one responsible for engaging, and even in 2011 to 2013, the 2007 guidelines for the medical board had talked about periodic review, urinalysis being one of the things that a practitioner needed to take part in and do. It was strongly suggested. Even as recently as 2010, when the family medicine practitioner guide came out and made that as a recommendation for controlled pain management therapy. And so based on that, and based on the fact that he's only been on probation for a little over 2.5 years, the Attorney General's office will object to him granting of the petition at this early stage. I think that he's gone quite a distance with his probation, and I think that he will continue to do well on his probation, but it is early in the process based on the severity of the underlying case and some of the statements that were made here today regarding remorse and his review back of the facts of the case. Thank you very much.
Okay, there being no other questions or other evidence or other witnesses, this concludes the petition hearing in this matter. The record is closed. The case is submitted, and we are off the record. And good luck to you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, board member.
So at this time, we're going to go into closed session. So we ask all the guests present to go outside and relax. I'd say take a walk outside, but it looks like it's still raining, so. Start on?
21, I think,
21?
when I looked at the board package.
Okay.
Let me see.
Nine, 20.
Okay.
Yeah. Close. 20. Yeah.
Oh, but I'm actually going to work backwards. I'm going to do 21 and then, I'm sorry, 20 and then 19.
Okay. No,
Right.
21 and then 20. Are you going to do the fund condition
Yeah.
first? Okay, yeah, 21 and then 20.
Okay. Am I on?
You are on. The floor is yours.
Okay. Am I on now? I'm ready? Okay, hello, my name is Sarah Hinkle. I'm from the DCA Budget Office. I'm here to discuss the board's budget. I've prepared 2 documents that we use in the Budget Office to monitor the budget. The first one I'm going to discuss is the board's fund condition. And the way that you could look at this is like a bank statement, the board's bank statement. The top and we read from top to bottom, and then from right or left to right. So the top section, the beginning balance, is the board's beginning balance, which was rolled over from the last fiscal year. Then we add any revenues and transfers that we received. And then the next section, the expenditures, are any expenditures that are going outside the fund. And then we arrive to the fund balance at the bottom. And the next number after that, the months in reserves, this number represents how many months the board can sustain itself if it, for any reason, stopped collecting any revenue. So for the prior year, the 18-19 fiscal year, it shows that the board had 12.1 months in reserves. So at this time, the board is in a is in a good situation. we recommend anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And so again, the 12 months represents a really good months in reserves to have. And so we don't foresee any concerns, or we don't have any issues that we foresee upcoming. Are there any questions to the fund condition that I can help answer?
I wanted to ask Mark if you had any specific things we need to be aware of.
Do you mind if I come sit up?
Oh, please. Take the seat of honor. Your Honor, you're here.
I'm not going to hit the gavel, I promise. All right, so on the fund condition, the fund condition is actually very healthy. We have the $1.5 million loan repayment scheduled to come back this year. Unless we hear anything different, we're going to get it back this year, is my understanding. And actually, if you look at our months in reserve, as Sarah said, it is healthy. We have 12 months this year. It's going to bump up to 14.2 next year with that $1.5 million loan repayment. And on the fund conditions in the expenditure section, that shows what our full budget is. Right? That shows as if, in the out years, it shows as if we spent every single dollar in our budget, which we're not going to do, because we always need to have some sort of savings. And as Sarah's going to mention in her next page on the expenditure projection, we're projected to save a lot of money. So this isn't necessarily a 100% true reflection of what our months in reserves are going to be moving forward, because we're not going to spend every single dollar in our fund condition. So when you factor in those savings, and then when we do the revenue, we project the revenue at the board, and we're always pretty conservative, so we usually bring in a little bit more than we actually project. We don't want to project over what we're going to bring in. It's going to change that as well. So we're healthy as it stands now. If you look at the months in reserves in the out years, they are going down, but I'm kind of thinking that we're going to kind of be structurally balanced, where I think our revenue and our expenditures are going to be pretty closely aligned moving forward, is what I'm thinking. So that's it.
Okay. And then the second document is the board's monthly expenditures, and this is as of November of 2019, so fiscal month 5. The way that we read this document, so we have, is again from top to bottom, left to right. And then this first column here is the board's line items that they are expending their budget on. Then the next 3 columns are historical figures or historical years that I use to be able to project what the board anticipates to spend for this year. And the next column over the governor's budget is your current year's budget. This is the allotted budget that the board has to spend for this year. And then the next column over the current year expenditures is, again, everything that the board has spent as of November. And then 2 columns over the projections to year end. That is, again, what I use to project what the board is spending to ensure that we don't over expend the appropriation. So as I mentioned earlier, the board has a very healthy fund condition. If you bring your attention to the bottom right, the net appropriation, that $806,000, that is what I project your board to be reverting back by the end of the fiscal year. Are there any questions regarding the?
Yeah, can we go over the the revenue for the fee renewals, or just fees in general, just to?
Go back to the fund condition statement?
Yeah.
This one? Okay.
In terms of like how we're dealing with do we need to raise, are we expecting to raise the fees? Are we going to keep them the same? Is that a critical part of the fund condition?
Well, at this point, I mean, we don't anticipate the board to be raising any fees. We feel like they're in a good situation right now. That's something that me and Mark can discuss, but I don't think we've projected or anticipated to be raising any fees.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the months in reserve are going to float around 12 months moving forward. And even if we have less savings, if we have to do a fee increase, because of those savings every year, we can just kind of kick the can down the road a little bit, and because you probably need somewhere between 2 and 3 years to get a fee audit, get that done, potentially seek a bill in the legislature to raise our fees. We'd have to look to see what our current fee cap is, to see in regulations kind of what our fee range is right now, because we may not need to raise it above what our current fee cap is in our regulations, which is best case scenario, because then you don't have to go get legislation for that. So that's something we can discuss down the road. But I actually think we're pretty good. I think the 12 months is going to kind of just carry us for, I would say, for the next 5 or 6 years is what I'm thinking. But we'll keep an eye on it, though.
So for the student's perspective, we are a state entity. We are under the auspices of the Department of Consumer Affairs. And every licensing entity is under Consumer Affairs, I believe. And that's everywhere from your beautician to your contractor to veterinarian. I mean, everything's under there. So each of our boards go through financial responsibilities and justification for what we do. And these are the things we're talking about is if the state doesn't give us the money, we can't do our job. If we don't have enough employees, we can't get our job. If, and everything has to go through approvals and committees. And so, as you can imagine, things aren't the same as a private business where you can kind of do what you want when you need to. Everything has a process. And that's why, entities in the state and the federal government take a long time because it has a process. So you're seeing the process.
Does the current budget include the 2 new staffing positions that were approved?
Yeah, the budget does include those 2 new staffing positions. We're hiring them now, so part of that $800,000 in savings is the salary savings from not hiring them on July 1st. So we could probably factor in, that's probably somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 in savings right there.
Okay, because I know before we'd been talking either last year or the year before about with the practice training license coming up, that we would need more people to be able to review all of those and do the audits and everything. And I'm just worried that if those are starting to come up now, it might be a good time to begin perusing what does it take. Because I seem to remember Angie saying that looking at it, we hadn't done a fee increase in a really long time. And it might be a good time to slowly look at it if it takes 2 to 3 years out, so that as the postgraduate training license comes up, we're able to cover even more staff if we need it, so that things are done in a timely manner.
Okay.
I guess I got a little confused. Can someone explain this postgraduate training that's being created? What it is exactly?
My mother told me not to talk with my mouth full. So in the state of California, legislation was passed. So the law is that when you're a medical student, before you can get a full unrestricted license, you have to go through 3 years of a training license. Previously, you'd only have to go through 1 year and you could get a license. Is it running? Okay. So it's all about protecting the public, making sure everyone has the same education, making sure that you're able to keep track of what's happening in the residencies. And if someone does something in the residencies of concern, besides seeing their residency director, because they're under our responsibility as a training license, they may end up at the table. So things can go wrong. We hope it doesn't. Not all the states have it. Some of the states do. Each state has to make their own decision if they want to implement this concept. So if you go off and get a license in another state during your residency and come back to California and you've got a full unrestricted license, then usually there's reciprocity, so you don't have to go through this training. But if you're in California or any of the other states that require it, you got to finish 36 months before you get an unrestricted license. Now, you may have more years of postgraduate training, fellowships, things like that. You're still covered. I mean, you don't have to do more than 36 months. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
There's a nice FAQ on the website.
Yes.
We had people practice after 1 year, after internship. You could potentially do, your surgery, 1 year of internal, whatever it was, and then go off and put up a sign and say, hey, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I am open for business. And the risk to the public after you've only done your intern year and you haven't actually completed a residency in anything and you've had 1 year is so great that it's probably a much more responsible thing, since people were taking advantage of that, to be able to say, no, you cannot practice on your own until you finish 3 years.
Will it happen as far as staff privileges and insurance providers accepting you as provider? Everybody had to be residency trained, board certified, or board eligible. Good.
Were there any other questions pertaining to the projection or the fund condition statement that I can?
Quick question, how are we doing with Breeze? Are you guys having to spend any more money? I saw a little bit allocated to information technology.
For the Breeze, that one, I would actually have to come back with an answer for you. I haven't really prepared myself on that topic. So if you allow me, I could get in touch with Mark and I can give you more information on how the board is.
Yeah, because I know there's sometimes you guys get surprises with just the time it takes to get things done and the cost, right? Because we do have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers, but Breeze is in the maintenance phase now, so our costs are going down. And just off the top of my head, I believe the contract for last year was 150-odd thousand. It's down to 90 this year for us, for 90,000. So it's slowly going down. And my understanding is at some point in the near future, it's just going to be gone once we're done paying it off. So, but right now we're
Are they giving you any like ongoing support for that money or for your staff? I mean, do you feel like your staff is well-trained and?
Yeah, I think we're well-trained. We do get good support from our OIS at DCA. We don't have any issues with it at this point. Anytime we've had any bills or anything else that needed Breeze maintenance or implementation, they've been really good at helping us. Oh, Breeze is the DCA's, I don't want to say new computer system, but we have it's our replacement to our legacy systems, and it's what we use for licensing and enforcement now. It does make the process more transparent. There were some issues during the implementation, but it looks like those have been ironed out at this point.
That's a good question. I'll make sure I follow up with more information and provide it to Mark.
And then also for the updates for the website, that's all covered under the marketing budget allocated by DCA to our board, right? Or
Yeah.
like anything that has to do with like processing anything online?
Yeah, that's the pro rata we pay every year. It's for all the services by the administrative unit.
You feel like you're taking good use of those?
Yes, yeah. And speaking of that, I actually came from the budget office. I'm a little biased, but the budget office does a great job for us. Sarah does a great job, and the budget managers and everyone else. So I think we're getting every dollar that we pay for from the budget office.
Great.
Yeah.
Ask for more.
Thank you, Mark. Is there any other questions?
Thank you.
That's it?
Okay, well, thank you for,
so much.
yeah, you're
Appreciate it.
welcome.
Next item will be number 10, strategic plan update.
You want me to stay here?
Sure.
All right, I'll stay
You
here.
look good here.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Okay, so the strategic plan update. So so the board members, we convened back on April 30th of 2019, and we talked about the strategic plan, goals and objectives, and everything else we wanted to accomplish during the next 5 years. And that plan was approved on May 16th, 2019, at our board meeting in Chino, California. And subsequent to that, after it was approved, me and Machiko, we met with Solid's strategic planning and facilitation staff on the 17th of October to go over an action plan to achieve all those goals and objectives, kind of keep us accountable for all those goals and make sure to get done in the next 5 years. So what we did is we kind of broke every fiscal year for the next 5 years into 4 quarters, and we figured out when we're going to start each goal and objectives, who's going to work on it, and when it's going to be completed. So in your packet is that complete action plan, but what I'm going to go over is the goals and objectives we want to work on for the next 2 quarters. So in quarter 3 of this fiscal year, which is January through March, goal 3.7 is to audit the website and develop content to keep it up to date, innovative, informative, and to drive stakeholders to the website. So me and Machiko met with DCA's public Publications, Designs, and Editing Unit to kind of go over what we want our website to look like, because I kind of feel like we're kind of boxed in our website. So the new website we're kind of looking at has an open feel. It provides for more information to be on there, easier to navigate. So that's so we kind of put together a profile of what we want the website to look like. It's been approved by that unit, sent up to our OIS unit to be implemented, and we've been communicating actually within the last week of when we can plan to kind of go over it and make the final plans to get this implemented. So we're on the timing's good on this one, and I think we're actually gonna have this done in the next month or two. So updating the website. Goal 5.5 is to update procedural manuals to onboard new employees and prepare for succession planning. This is actually one of the things that the board is required to work on during the internal audits by our department. It was determined that we needed to update our manuals. So by April, this is due anyway, so we're starting this now. I'm planning to meet with staff. I've kind of got some other procedural manuals that kind of meet the requirements I need to meet. So I'll be starting this in the next week or two, I would imagine. So moving on to the next quarter, which is quarter 4, which is April through June of this year. We have a handful of goals here. Goal 1.1, the first goal is to investigate the options to implement the interstate medical licensure compact to streamline the licensing process. It's something that we've heard a lot of information from SMB. I have contacts there. I'm going to make some contacts with them and kind of figure out how it works with us to make sure that we can do it without compromising our protection of the public, which is our mandate. So that's something I'm going to be doing probably in April through June, if not sooner, if I can get to it.
If you come to the April meeting,
yeah, we'll talk.
We'll talk a lot.
The next goal is to create a quarterly newsletter as a way for stakeholders to get to know the board and promote the board's listserv and website so that important issues are disseminated to all interested parties. That's something I'm planning to work on. One of my big things is outreach. As the executive director, my 2 things is I want to bring us to the modern era when it comes to technology, and I want to get outreach out there. Any important issue, I love that our website's going to be updated and more functional, but I want outreach. I want to have options. I want to have our website. I want to be on social media, Twitter, everything else, just to kind of send out these mass, like YouTube videos just to let everyone know kind of what's going on with the board, how to contact us, just to reduce your need to call the board. I just want to get the information out there.
The concept now is, rather than waiting for people to contact us, that we're going to be very proactive and push out information regularly that pops up on people's devices so that they'll see what's going on, and a newsletter, and maybe I'll say a few words, or maybe, each of the board members will, put in comments.
One student did volunteer to do a video for us. So just
okay.
FYI, if you guys want to volunteer.
Good.
Awesome. So the quarterly newsletter is something I'm working on, and I'll work with our publications designers and editing team to kind of figure out a template and go from there. So goal 4.3 is to collaborate and build relationships with lawmakers and staffers in order to have a stronger voice and represent the board. That's something I'm planning to do. I have a couple other executive officers and executive directors that have a lot of contacts at the Capitol. I'm planning to go down there and shake hands and get to know some folks down there. And then the last goal for the fourth quarter of this fiscal year is to research options available to collaborate and utilize Solid to assist in creating a more cohesive team. That's something we've actually already started.
Tell them about Solid, too.
Yeah, Solid is the department's training solutions. They do a lot of trainings specifically for this. It's to kind of build a better team, build good culture. But they also do things like our strategic plan. They helped us kind of build our strategic plan. They'll come to our office, kind of figure out, like the most efficient way to do things in the office as well. They do a variety of things for the department.
One of the things that's required by the state and is that we have to go through harassment training. So is it every year or every 2 years now? Every other year. You have to sit and go through a module that has actors and vignettes, and they show you the different situations, and what the legalities are in the state of California. I can tell you that the state of California has more stringent guidelines than the federal government does. So if you learn what's happening here, you'll be safe. But it really is good to understand, just a real quick example is, you two guys are telling a joke. She happens to hear it, but you weren't talking to her, but she heard it. Well, she can make a complaint because it bothered her. So it's not the intent. You didn't intend to harm her, but she witnessed something that harmed her. That's how the California laws. I don't know if the federal's that strict or not, but maybe. But it was good because once I learned the things that I went through, I brought this concept to medical associations and other bodies to start, educating their boards about, what's proper behavior, what isn't, how to change the culture to becoming more sensitive and keep from people putting their foot in their mouth, things like that. Okay.
All right, so with that goal to utilize solid, we've actually already started. I think it was last month, we went to a what's called a True Colors presentation with the team, where you got to learn your personality type, and it kind of helped. The goal of it is for you to learn your own personality type for self-reflection, and to kind of learn what everyone else's personality type is, and within that, you kind of learn the best way to communicate with everyone individually. That's the goal of it, and I am seeing some benefits for it, but like long-term, we'll kind of see how it works.
The other thing that they gave us to do this year is a safety driving course. And you go through vignettes and things like that, how to set your mirrors properly, how to, just different driving things that you don't necessarily get at the DMV. So that's every year or every other year? 4 years. Every 4 years. When did they start it? I was looking forward to getting out there on the road and doing something. But it was fun and interesting. Anything else?
Those are the goals for the next 2 quarters. There's several goals in here that are detailed in our strategic plan. And the action plan that we worked with Solid, and they did a great job. This is going to hold us accountable, and hopefully we can get all, or if not all, a majority of these goals completed in the next 5 years before the next strategic plan is up.
All right, very good.
Quick question. Is there a particular email where people just can ask, not complaints, but just questions, or they want more information?
Yeah, the board does have a general email.
It's just osteopathic@dca.ca.
Okay.
Question, do you have an app?
We do not have it now. That's a good question. It's something I haven't looked into yet. That's a very good question.
We like suggestions,
Yeah.
thank you.
Facebook,
Put on our
Instagram?
agenda.
Yes. Yeah, we don't have a Facebook or Instagram yet. That's something that Public Affairs has been working with me on to kind of get that implemented. But we want to put together our first video, which is going to be what is a DO video, and that's going to kind of be our maiden voyage to social media. Yeah.
The state association, you as students can participate in OPSC. Are you familiar with that organization? Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons of California. So you can go ahead and Google opsc.org. And their next meeting is next month in San Diego. If you're in the San Diego area, students are free. So you can come and learn and do things. So go ahead and check that out if you have time to do that. You'll see what the state does as far as educating the doctors, the different topics, the workshops, the lectures, social events, things like that. So should be a good meeting. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Now, does anyone have a bong? No. We're going to talk about cannabis. Does anyone have a bong? I thought that would be a good lead-in. So we have actually 2 sets of guidelines. One is the Federation of State Medical Board guidelines, and the other is the State of California guidelines. Federation, yeah. So we have to basically take a vote to approve these guidelines and make them our official guidelines.
Right, that would be to adopt those
Yes.
guidelines as yours.
Now, do we adopt them both, or do we have to adopt just one of them?
The language, we adopt the language, right?
The FSMB one?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it depends. Maybe you take them separately.
Well, do you have,
And-
since you have a background in, I mean, do you have an opinion about either of the guidelines?
Both of them, and the California Medical Board language is good. I think there's some things that we can improve on. They require for physicians to educate patients on things that they're not educated on. So I think
There's some gaps there.
What about the federations?
The Federation was like a larger view on how to approach the subject, and then the California Medical Board kind of condensed those into their own language. So I will go with the California Medical Board language.
If there are suggested edits, you can ask maybe a subcommittee or just Claudia. No,
Subcommittee would
to
be
come back
best.
with some language and bring it back as to edits to the medical board version at the next meeting.
Or actions, if we're going to require them to do something, how are we going to support them?
All right. So why don't we just first start by voting on accepting guidelines? And should we specify accepting the State of California guidelines
Right, the medical
as they're
board.
currently written?
Right.
So I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion second. Is there discussion? Discussion?
The med board.
The med
Correct,
boards, yes.
Correct, and then you can always update it later, you can take your time, you can establish a subcommittee, and
If we want to do a subcommittee, can we do that today?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How much of a difference, since you've gone over
Yeah.
this, do you see between the two? And where are the differences?
Oh, we have to pull the documents. But the California, I know they submitted the copy and then they made edits like a year later. So I think it was approved on the 2018. So I'm just thinking even the last 2 years, there's been more information that has come out. So
Right.
just with that
It's the most
perspective.
up to date.
Yeah, I think it should be upon us to accept the language and then go back and help them and us kind of
Right.
review what
Okay.
was done.
So the vote now will be to accept the guidelines. That's first thing, okay?
we have a motion and a second.
Vote, please. Yes.
Yes.
Cheryl Williams.
Yes.
Corey Damian.
Yes.
Dr. Buhari.
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Jensen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yay, it only
They've
took
been
us
accepted.
like
Thank you.
5 years.
Well, the reason you need to have guidelines for this is not only is it an issue for practicing physicians and their patients, but it's also an issue for practicing physicians and themselves and their family.
Yep.
And I think that the more that we can set up the guidelines to help people maneuver this situation, the better that will be as far as putting ourselves in a situation where we're best protected. For your knowledge, if a hospital has a zero tolerance and you're using product, even if it's for medicinal reasons, if it's zero tolerance, it's zero tolerance. And they can drug test you and take action against you, even if it's legal. It's like anything else. Alcohol is legal, but not when you're on the job, right? So it's time, situation, and things like that. So a lot to think about.
So are we subcommittee or are we approving them through and through with the changes that I make with our local, blah, 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 all that?
Right, so now they've approved the use of the med board guidelines. Now, if Dr. Zamuda would like to establish a committee to work on updating them, he can certainly do that, and he can establish a committee at any time. You don't have to do it at a meeting. You can do it after a meeting.
Well, what should be the update? Every year, every 2 years?
They could look at it, maybe see if any updates are even needed right now, and then they can come back and do an update to the board meeting maybe in May. And then if there's no recommendations to adopt, then.
I'd like to establish a subcommittee chaired by Claudia Marcato, and I'll leave it to her to decide who her compatriots will be to work on this. Or do I have to tell her?
Anybody interested?
Yeah, why don't we find out who's interested, and then you can
Okay.
appoint one other person.
Okay, who's interested? Okay. You have well, actually, that's good, because then you don't have to have the meeting act if there's 3 people.
Correct. So they can meet,
Two people can meet.
right, they can
See, if there's
meet.
more than three people, you have to have a public hearing like this. But if two meet, you don't have to have a meeting.
So
Thank
they
you for
can-
reminding me.
Sure, so they could come, they can decide when they can exchange, and you can do it all by electronically, whatever they can look to
Take them out
update.
for lunch if.
Yeah,
And then you can bring forward a follow-up report at our next board meeting.
right, so it looks like we're meeting probably in May, and they can bring their committee's recommendations then.
You know, you make our work so much easier. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. That was a long time coming.
No, I was gonna say this is huge because patients have been waiting for this. They want to go talk to the physicians, and from what I understand, Dr. Smudo, the license is being held at the federal level, right? So by engaging and even recommending without guidelines, then your license is at stake. So this frees you up from that and allows you to just have an open conversation, obviously with patient care guidelines. But that's good for, I think, the public and the physicians.
Okay, we're open to future, number 12, future agenda items, marijuana update guidelines. Anything special?
Yes, so in a future agenda item, and I'll check with the department because I'm new to this, my annual evaluation is coming up, so I don't know if we're going to wait till May or do a special meeting.
Annual eval. Executive Director, okay. Any other pressing things we need to follow up on?
Is there any state legislation that we should be aware of?
You will be hearing a
That's
lot
right.
about legislation next.
Okay, so we'll put state
Yeah. But there'll be
legislature.
a legislative update.
We
Okay.
actually just got our first request for a fiscal impact on a bill yesterday, so I think the bills are going to start coming in now.
May will be a good time.
May.
Who does the fiscal evaluation?
Me and Terry will take a look at it.
Okay,
Yeah, and then we'll work with the department if you have any questions.
okay, fiscal update. Do we anticipate any hearings?
We usually have a couple hearings every meeting, Victoria.
Yeah, it'll probably be 2 hearings.
2 hearings, okay.
I just thought of something. I think you mentioned, or Corey mentioned, that there was when the California Medical Board gets complaints, they hold on to them for a period of time.
Oh, you mean our complaints?
Yeah, I wanted maybe to, if we can look into why that's happening or how we can collaborate with them. Maybe there's something we can set up where it's like immediate, or you're checking in with them on a regular basis. Maybe we
Isn't
can-
there legislation that says that the DO and an MD in their office have to have a visible sign up that says, who do you report to
Yeah,
for any
Yeah,
complaints?
each of our boards have a
Okay,
notice of consumer
so
requirements.
maybe it would be a good reminder to send to our physicians who have a license that you need to have clearly posted the name of the board, address, phone number, email, everything
Right,
for any
there's-
complaints.
There's specific text that is
Yes,
required, and that's in the
correct.
law.
But we don't know what the compliance is at this point.
And we don't know why the medical board is holding on to them for.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
different
That's a different
concern.
thing. Got it.
That's
Yeah.
something I need to contact the medical board about, because I think what it is when patients want to file a complaint, they don't
I don't realize.
even accept, right?
Yeah.
They just need to call the medical board.
You're a white coat, you're a doctor, so we got to call the doctor board, you
Yeah,
know.
so what I need to do is contact the medical board and just kindly ask them not to sit on them for 2, 3, 4 weeks before they send me over a group of 50 complaints, because what that does is it creates an immediate backlog and they get all this.
Yeah, tell them to put the shoe on the other foot and see how they feel. Okay. Future meeting dates, what's our May meeting?
Pomona.
May what?
Seventh.
7th.
We'll be in the office next Tuesday. So I'll discuss locations with them and keep everyone updated. September, I've already reached out to a facility in San Diego. They just opened my email and forwarded on the request for approval. So we should have a location locked in for that.
What's the date of that one? September, you said?
September 10th.
September 10th is, where are we going to be? You going to bring a cake? Bring a cake. We'll sing. Oh, that's fine. Make sure there's enough to pass. September the 10th,
September 10th, yes.
where?
San Diego.
SD, okay. And we need another one after that?
No, but going back to the evaluation for the ED, I'll probably reach out to you sometime.
Oh, okay. We can do a phone on that one?
We have to do a closed session.
Yes.
At some point.
Yes.
So, yeah,
We can tag it onto the other closed sessions and another meeting.
Yeah.
Probably May.
Yeah, for me.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all we need to do right now for planning?
Yep.
Okay. Before I adjourn, I want to thank all the students for making the trip out today with this inclement weather. We hope you have a safe trip going back to your homes and schools, and hope you can bring the message that we're the good guys, we're not the bad guys, and that you know, I always say, when I was in practice, if there was a question I would have, I would call the malpractice insurance and ask them a question, talk to the lawyers there, and then I'd call the board, ask them a question there, so they can be a resource for you in your practice when something that you feel uncomfortable about, how to handle it, or call the medical association, because you don't have to feel like you're in it all alone. There are all these other support organizations that are out there for you, so you can prevent doing something that might cause a problem down the road that's unexpected. Okay, everybody, adjourned.
Yay.
We're going to take pictures now.
Let me lettuce my teeth.